is on the other side.
We're in
Yeah, there
Glen,
it is.
There.
Awesome.
okay.
All right.
Glenroy?
Yes. Yes.
7:00, we'll call the meeting to order. And, record attendance, we have someone online, so we will need to do it, go around the table and do it orderly.
Okay.
Okay, we'll let you start, Jean. For recording
Jean.
attendance.
Sure. Jean Balgrowski Hinshaw.
Tom Claus? Ed Rippey.
Carol Wyman. Shirley Green.
And your staff is Rob Taylor?
Yes.
Whitney Banker.
And shall we record visitors too?
Yes, please. You guys want to put a sign-up sheet out or? We can get all the names. It's Kurt Goddard. Ready to sign in? Oh, Dick Windsor right here.
Yep.
Carl Dubay.
Carl DeBay.
Hi, Steve Doherty.
Doherty. John D. Pennell.
John DiPatetto and
Luke Hurley.
Luke Hurley. We got everybody so far. If anybody else comes in, we'll grab them. Yes. All right.
Okay, so I think we probably should skip public comments for now. And approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion, put them on the table?
Sure. So moved.
Second. Were there any corrections or additions, amendments?
No, it was like read like a novel, though.
Yeah. Very thorough, very good.
Yes, very
He
good.
is a pro.
She is good.
Okay, so we, vote to approve them,
Yep, motion to approve. Second.
okay? We'll need to approve orally too. We'll start with Eugene.
Yes, Jean Balgrowski Hinshaw approved. Aye.
Tom Claus, aye. Ed Rippey, aye.
Carol Wyman, I.
Shirley Green, aye. Okay. So, probably we should, well, we've said our names actually, haven't we? I was gonna say introduce ourselves too. But, do you want to step up to come up to the table? You're next on the agenda.
Come on, Steve. See.
Carl, you coming? Guy?
Mhm.
Uh-oh.
Oh. We had all,
We'll stop with him.
yeah.
It'll be a long night.
He's been bulking up.
You want me to?
Sure, come on up. We're all coming up. All right, Madam Chairperson and board members, I'm Stephen Doherty, live in Salem, New Hampshire. When we were last here before you, there were some questions that were unanswered, and you had given us that task to go home and get the answers to some of your questions that you had. And one of the biggies that I thought was when we were talking about the area of temporary disturbance, we thought it was gonna be somewhere around 68,000 square feet. And Mr. DeBay went back to his office, did a lot of work, and we got it down now close to around 50,000 feet. So it shrunk quite a bit. And then when we last met, you folks talked about maybe coming down for some site walks, which we had done that. And hopefully that was helpful for you folks to see the work that I've done on big projects. And what they look like. In one case, one was 20 years old. Another case, one was like 8 to 10 years old. And so you got to see all that as well. So we did do a lot of homework, and then we also brought Luke Hurley with us. He's our wetland scientist, in case you had any questions from Luke on that. All right, so I think that we're pretty much ready to proceed. Right, Carl?
Yes, sir. My name is Carl. So I think there were some questions, concerns that you had and others had. There's first, was a question, I believe, from someone of the public that asked about the procedure of the special exception. So I'm just gonna summarize that in the zoning ordinance. So in the zoning ordinance, I think they had a question about, procedural items. under 406.1, wetland areas. That's where we fall under, or why we're submitting. And, it's very simple. Section 8 talks about the description of a wetland area, which is very similar to, what the federal standard is. Section B talks about the federal standard and mapping, and all the wetlands were done by Mr. Hurley, who's a licensed, wetland scientist. Under section C, it talks about permitted uses. And under permitted uses, you can impact wetlands relating to cultivating and farming and wildlife, open space, water supply wells, tree farming, best management practice, forestry, that type of thing. That's allowed by right. So you can do that without a permit. You can do that without coming to this, commission usually. And you can do that without certainly going to ZBA for a special exception. That's under section C. The last section is section D, and that says special exception. So I'm not really sure how this has been jurisdicted over the years in town. But under section D, special exception, it basically says you can impact a wetland, but you have to follow the rules. And those rules are that you get a special exception from the ZBA. And those rules include, input from conservation and that type of thing. And there's special exception criteria, which are pretty reasonable, actually. But we filed under the special exception under section D. So Article 4, Section 406.1, and it's really under section D. And there are three things that, three categories that we can actually have an impact of a wetland for special exception. And there are roads and driveways, utilities, power lines, pipelines, anything essential to the productive use of the land, which would be located outside of the wetlands, obviously. All our buildings, everything meets the wetland setbacks that are required in the ordinance. So there's no buildings within the setback distances or anything like that. So, but it allows for roads, driveways, utilities. It also allows for what they call water impoundments. That's pretty much a decades old terminology. We usually use it, you call it drainage, ponds, best management practices and that type of thing. So water impoundments, and then also accessory buildings, but we don't have any accessory buildings that we're impacting for wetlands. But so what we have on our project is we have some impacts, and of the total impacts, I think 75% of them are really temporary, and they're going to be revegetated with natural vegetation, slopes, and that type of thing. But the plans that we gave you, we've updated them, and we've reduced those impacts, and they're only needed for the project to access, for emergency access, for driveways, for roads, for utilities, for drainage ponds, and all of that. So the plans really go through a lot of detail on where each impact is and why and how, and grading and utilities and everything else. And then Luke actually is going to give you a short presentation on the functions and values. I think that was another question you had. So there was a question about logistics. That's how we filed it, and we confirmed that, with Rob and everything else, and we believe we did the absolute right thing, and we believe that you need a special exception. I know people put driveways in all the time over a wetland ditch, and maybe they don't say anything, but technically it needs a special exception. Technically, it needs to code to you. You probably see some of them. Maybe you don't see all of them in town, but certainly, we're following the rules. So that's that. We do have some updated plans. I know we passed out some plans the last time.
Mhm.
And then, so I'd just like to pass these around. Many of these you've already seen, but just for the record, we wanted to update everything with detail.
And you said there's also been some places where there's less impact on.
Yes. Yes, and I'm gonna quickly step you through and just get you updated on that. And
One more.
So-
Oh,
Oh, you need one.
so I'm gonna try not to repeat myself,
Yeah.
try not to repeat myself from the last time. So,
So this essentially, we can get rid of these old ones.
Yeah.
This is.
Yeah. And many of these are basically the same thing, but a little bit more detail.
Okay.
So,
You
we have one. So,
This-
of the 77
I got
acres.
that.
So we meet the density criteria, we meet, all of that, obviously. But we have a mixture of townhouses and apartments. And, so we have, the site plans, grading, preliminary grading, utilities, drainage, sewer, all of that shown. We're updating the access and facilities to the water tower that is on the site. We have Mercy access roads going in, and we list all the impacts on this little color up. There's a picture that we talked about. I believe you saw that the last time. It's really a picture of the slope area that the apartment buildings would be on and the access drive and utilities. That has pretty much been harvested and timbered. And then we have Maple Street, and there are some homes along Maple Street there that are off the property, obviously. And so there's a slope. There's another plate that we actually produced on, it looks like this. It has some red on it. Yeah.
I have a big one. You want me to-
You do have a big one if you want to show
I mean,
it.
I have a bigger one.
Yeah, sure. So while he's getting that set up, this is just a very simple data point, really, just a reference point.
This is a good picture.
Yeah, yeah. So so that's fine. If you look on the tax maps of Enfield, there's tax map 14A. And for tax map 14A, oh, you gotta turn it, yeah, there you go.
I don't have my glasses.
Tax map 14A is shown in the upper left corner of that plan. I'm talking a little louder just in case people need. And it shows actually an open space subdivision on that plan. It's been carried forward for many years in the town of Enfield on your own tax maps. So it's a open space subdivision right in the middle of the site, pretty much where our development is going as well, with a full access road all the way down to Maple Street. And that was approved and actually shown on the tax maps. It's a big deal when the town actually, it confirms, we did get that approved. And it was shown on the maps, but never built.
That was the main access to Maple Street.
Yes, and what we did was we're having a main access to the state road now, so we don't, have all that stuff going on Maple Street. All we have is a gated emergency access drive with the sewer lines going through there, and that's it. So no traffic onto Maple Street. But the point of this picture is that our development, our proposed development is actually designed to be located further away from the homes on Maple Street than what was previously designed. And it would be a lot more wetland impact as well. So you see the pink shaded areas there between that open space development, residential, and Maple Street and the homes there. That pink shaded area would have been work that they would have needed to do, we need to do to effectuate that subdivision and a lot more wetland impact.
But in that pink shaded area, it's all houses on that plan.
Yeah, houses, everything, right. And so we pulled the development away from there and away from the wetlands. So we have even less wetland impact than what was previously approved. So we just wanted to point that out, just as a point of reference.
And you've got ponds in that area.
Yeah, we have ponds and drainage and basically not touching anything. We're gonna let things grow in. It was harvested, but we're gonna let things grow in. And then we have some pictures of the townhouses and apartment buildings on the next sheet. I think we might have shown that to you. I can't remember. It was certainly shown at ZBA. There's another sheet that we're showing that basically the end of the apartment building is sort of designed to take some of the architectural characteristics from the Shaker Village building. The shape and form factor and that type of thing. We had a board on that as well. So Laramie Farm apartment building.
Yeah, that's the Shaker Museum, and this is the gable end of our building.
Okay.
Right, so the Shaker Village, it was community living. I guess that might have been the form of apartments back then. But it had segregated living, males and females had to live separately. And but a similar roof pitch, similar height and aspect ratios on that, similar floor plate arrangement. But that's just a point of reference.
Siding's gonna be on.
It would be like a hardy plank type of a durable siding that you don't have to paint every 3 or 4 years. But it won't be a cheap siding either,
So what you're saying is that if I go to the Shaker Museum or Shaker Building and look at that, that's exactly the height.
It's not exactly, but we showed pictures of both, side by
Up
side.
there, see the
Yeah.
Shaker Museum's on the right.
Yeah. So
It's
it is
just,
a
they're
little
taking the
bit-
cues of it. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but we tried to take the cues on that. And we'll be working with planning board on that, hopefully shortly. The next page is a graphical summary of the wetland impacts on the project. And so we have the project as a key, and then we blow up the areas of wetland impacts, and you can see they're all access drives. And all the green will be green. That green are just stabilized slopes that would be revegetated and allowed to grow. There's no lawn, none of that. It's all natural vegetation. We do have a table there if anyone asked about numbers and specific square footages and all of that. But our total now is about 58,000 square feet. That was reduced from almost 70,000 square feet with, more precise design. And we're saving about, 72% of these impacts are actually just going to be put back into naturalization format. There's another sheet, and I'm going to go quickly through this, but basically we did some sections through a typical impact finger through the project that we have cuts and fills shown, and we blow up those sections, and you can see in sectional view, there's access drives, there's utilities, there's water lines, electric lines, underground treatment systems, slopes that are revegetated, ponds, which are water impoundment and treatment areas, and the emergency access drive and sewer utilities and all of that. So it basically shows you a typical area of work and how the design works through these, what I call the wetland finger up the side of the slope that you saw on the pictures there. Another question that you guys had, someone had.
Can I just go back real quick?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm going.
No, that's okay. No, so the table, and I believe I understood you correctly, but I just want to clarify it.
Yeah.
If possible. So, once the vegetation is grown back, you're saying that there's only gonna be the 16,400 left that's impacted. So you got the 72% of the,
Am
am I reading that
yeah, so
correctly?
28% of the, about a quarter
Yep,
to
yep,
a third, almost a third is basically the access drives
right,
that
yeah,
are on crossing those fingers and that type of thing,
Right,
right?
yeah.
And the rest is going to be revegetated.
right, okay,
Right,
that's what I
yeah.
thought. That's how I'm reading it, okay.
Yes,
Now,
absolutely.
you said the access drives are impervious. What kind of material?
Oh, it's just pavement, asphalt pavement. But all of those access drives,
Well, the emergency drive.
Oh, yeah.
Is gonna be gravel.
the emergency drive will be
That'll
gravel.
be, that will be pervious,
Yeah, right.
okay? The impervious would be the main roads and the roads coming up.
That's correct. And then any access drive that's paved is actually going to be curbed and closed drainage so that we take the drainage and then we treat it. So we don't just let it go, so,
Yeah.
we treat it to AOT standards, obviously, the treatment train methods.
How about the main access? Is that straight or is it gonna be curved?
The main access drive
Yeah.
On the plans, it has some curvilinear to it, and it's curved.
How about a soft runoff? If it's,
Yeah, so all the runoff on the project would be contained and treated to the state standards, DES standards. They make you do that, absolutely.
so it's not gonna be straight down that.
No, it will not. So the water gets intercepted. There's swales, there's vegetated swales, there's forebays, there's treatment areas. There's wet ponds, there's infiltration ponds where we can make them, but
But you're talking more about the pavement and the roadway, water flying down that hill, right?
Right.
that,
So,
this is
There are
straight.
catch basins
Straight
along
away
the
is
way,
gonna catch
right?
her.
There are catch basins along the way.
oh, right.
That will be picking up that water as it comes down, and there's curves holding it into the roadway. So there won't be,
But the roadway itself won't be straight, will it?
No,
No,
it has
there is-
curving.
there is some-
Yeah.
curve to it, but it's not straight up a hill.
Shirley, it looks like Jean may have a question online.
Oh, sorry, Jean, please. I get say listening and I forget to see your hand. Yeah,
That's
go ahead.
okay. Let me see, let me unraise my hand. There we go. Do you have these diagrams in soft copy by chance? That you could email me?
We could email those to Rob and then he could distribute them, sure.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
So,
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
So if there's the impervious drives And then we also mentioned that the emergency access is not going to be impervious, correct?
Correct.
But where is that in the total?
Oh, so what we did on the emergency access drive, our engineer, when we were putting this together, we just called it a driveway, whether it was pervious or impervious. But there's actually a credit. So on the impact area 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 was totally eliminated, 9 and 10. All those impacts on the right side there that show that tan color, but the road on the bottom would be actually a gravel. It's like a woods road that would be gated. So those we should have actually split this up into a gravel area on the emergency access drive. He just called it all drives, worst case. So actually the super majority of the 28% is in the emergency access drive, which is gravel. So out of that, you're gonna see a very, very little amount of actual pavement. So,
That's to your
yeah,
credit.
thank you, sir, for bringing that up.
Yes, because that's what I thought it was. And then.
Yeah,
So that's included in the 16,700.
so actually, if you go to the table on the impervious access drives, and it should have been split to the gravel,
It's 4,
it's like, it's so small what's left over.
it's like half.
Yeah, it's very,
Oh,
very.
you're right, because you got impact 4, 5, 6. Most of those impacts are the gravel
Yeah,
road.
4, 5, 6, 7, a
9,
piece of
10.
9, and almost most of 10. So
Right,
out of the 16,000, it's like down to probably just a few thousand square feet, and that's it over the whole project.
well, that's great.
But thank you, sir, for
So
pointing that out.
4
Yes.
gravel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
There was another question. There's a pre-development watershed area plan on a couple sheets in there. Just has some colors. So when you step way back on this project and you look at all the water that would be flowing onto the project from off of our site. So there was a question about that. So if you see a big green area there, it's called area B. B is in Bravo. That goes all the way up. It's off our property, goes all the way up the hill. And to the peak of that ridge line. That entire area actually pretty much it goes around our development of the townhouses and apartments for the most part. And it actually heads south. And that area B is what is mostly the where we have 2 impact areas, which are actually open bottom box culverts. So area B would be flowing under those box culverts, which are open bottom, naturalized bottoms, 4 feet, and 4 feet high. And we specifically designed the roads and driveways. There's two of those that would accommodate that flow. We would show obviously the hydraulic calculations for that and everything. Fish and Game would have input to this when we get to that point, and we work with them every day on many projects, and we kind of know what they look for and what they ask for. So, and Luke does, he's spent his life with these folks at DES, and we know they're going to be looking for the hydraulic calcs, that we know that they're going to look for open bottom box culverts that are 48 inches wide and 48 inches high for just to pass things and wildlife and that type of thing. So we just did it. There's nothing really in the regs that talk too much about that. When we get into the permitting on that and the type of flow it is and the type of swale or intermittent streams, there's some calculations we have to do, but we're already preempting that. We're already knowing that they're going to be looking for that. We didn't just put in a bunch of pipes and say, we'll wait for Fish and Game to respond, and maybe they'll ask us to do a small box. We're just putting in the big ones because we just know that they're going to be looking for that. And so our wetland impacts and all that, all the design of those, the head walls, the roadways are all, you see those on the plan. So that's area B. For the most part, area A that you see in orange is off to the right of the site. For the most part, that area basically just flows through our site. We do have some intercept swales at the intercept where there's the last apartment building, but pretty much all of orange, that orange area kind of flows, it just keeps going. We're not gonna touch it. It's there now and it keeps going. And that's a good thing. We want to actually mirror the flows and mimic the flows that are already out there now. We don't want to reduce them and we don't want to increase them. So all the drainage design, the calculations, the DES permitting review, that's what they want to see. They want to see that we're treating flows, that we're not, cutting something off completely, and then we're not blowing things out. They want a perfect balance. Area E in purple, same thing, that's where most of the work happens there with the treatment and everything. And we have intercept ponds and that flow keeps going, but we certainly don't make the flow any more than what it was there now. And we try not to make it any less either. So with that design and the modeling and everything, what the state makes us do, we do that. Same thing with area D. So it's actually a pretty straightforward project, working on the side of a hill, and we know what the state would be looking for. And erosion control and SWIP and EPA permitting and everything, it works out pretty well.
So do you have to have a hydraulic study done to see what the impact will be?
Yes, we do all of that, right? Yeah.
And it's, has that been done?
No. As soon as we know that, we get through the initial requirements of permitting, then we get into that heavy design, and that's all HydroCAD modeling, hydrology, test pitting, everything. And we already know what to expect out there. So, we are pre-designing for that. So all those ponds out there that we have those shown conservatively. We believe that that's a good practice to have, and we have pre-treatment to those ponds. But there's also areas of fill under the parking areas that we can use for storm techs if we need them. We have isolator rows, we have, recharge. We have all these tools and BMPs, best management practices, at our fingertips to use for this project. But what we did was conservatively, between the emergency access road and the project, it creates actually a natural, like a pond environment, which we can create into a pond. It's all naturalized. There's no lawn or anything. And those will grow up into, mature ponds and transitional areas that, the birds and wildlife actually, they like to use that area.
So right in the footprint here, there are, I count 9 different ponds. Those are all ponds that you're creating to
Yes.
act as retention ponds to.
They could be retention, they could be detention, they could be infiltration. It really depends on the final testing, but they will be ponds. As you know, you drive by something, sometimes a pond, it has real water in it, standing in there all the time, and that's designed that way. Sometimes it just happens. But we all have the hydraulic capacity, volumetric capacity, outlet control devices. Fish and Game even goes through every single one of those. They want to make sure that critters can use them and pass through them. They don't get stuck. They like smooth slopes. They like the transitional slopes that we're showing here. They like sloped curb, Cape Cod berm. Turtles can get up on those. They don't like the vertical curb or anything like that.
So they'll check it all out.
Oh yeah, yes, they do.
Will the hydraulic study impact be done before you apply to DES?
At the same time, there's different timeframes of applications that we need to apply for DES. There's AOT drainage permitting, there's wetland permitting. Fish and Game likes to see certain things at a certain time, so we usually start working with them early. So it's a whole process of information flow that we start giving them. We don't just dump everything on them all at once, all the agencies. They don't like that. They want to have input along the way. So that's what we're doing. And what we're doing on this project is what they would, we would expect them to ask for at the start. The other plans are just, grading plans,
Let me just
utility
go back,
plans.
because I got a question on this.
Oh, yeah.
You have the dark green border area, right?
Yes, that's basically the bubble of our development. And everything else beyond that on the dashed heavy black line is our property line. And all the stuff that's outside our work, we're gonna put into an open space conservation restriction. So that green line is our footprint of everything, slopes and, toes of slopes and all the roads and driveways and the buildings.
So is it pretty, how steep is it behind your the development, the green part, the orange part?
Our development is framed by that the heavy dash black line, and we had to do a slope analysis. This was done early on because we knew we were, you're gonna be asked those questions. So we did a slope analysis per the ordinance. It says you do a detailed survey and then you do the slope analysis and everything. And, you actually have a steep slope ordinance, as you know.
Mhm.
And, so there are a few areas that are steep slopes that we're staying away from because that is another resource area that if we were in those areas, we would be having to file another special exception, very similar. But we know in our design that we can avoid those, so we did.
Good.
So we're not working in the steep slopes. The steep slopes have very specific definitions, other than just 25%. It just so happens that, so those areas in our property, there's very small area of steep slopes, so we're not touching them. They have to be greater than 25%, and they have to meet a certain, level of precision standard on that. So when we actually went out and surveyed everything with on the ground and high precision drone, we proved, that, and this could be reviewed by anybody, that those steep slopes aren't steep, they're just under that in almost all those areas. So we have a plan, I think I brought it here somewhere, but it's already been filed with the town and with Rob and everything.
This is the point of reference. Where is the water tower on this? Is it in the green section?
Yes,
It is.
so if you look at the green section, there's a blue arrow that goes through, and then there's a gold arrow that talks about open bottom box culverts. Underneath one of those gold arrowheads, you're gonna see a circle. That's where the water tower is.
Okay, that's just, yeah.
Now, you can actually see it better
First page,
on the next page.
first page shows it well.
Yeah, the first page shows, yeah, so access to that water tower is really tough, but we're gonna, give you a really nice access up and around and up to it. With turnarounds and all that stuff, so you can see that in grading, utility grading plan A.
On your front page, excuse me, Carl.
Yeah.
The water tower is right here.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because I was up there and walking around, and off to the right of the water tower, there's a gully or a ravine.
Right. That's
Yeah.
where we're crossing, that's the
That's
wetland
where-
crossing,
Okay,
that's where one of the box culverts would be placed.
okay.
Yep, right through that ravine.
And that's for wildlife crossing?
It's for, for drainage and wildlife and everything, yeah. For drainage, we probably don't need a 4-foot box. But we might as well put one in because the design can accommodate that, and we think that that's what Fish and Game would look for anyhow. And then we have another one up behind there too. So that ravine is, crossed in 2 locations, and each location has the box culvert on it. You can see that on,
The ravine is gonna stay a ravine, it's not gonna be. filled.
except for where the access road is itself, and that's it.
I think what goes to the ravine you're talking about is on my property. The really deep, that's on my property. I think he's talking about the stream that crosses behind the water tower. When he's talking about crossing the 2 culverts.
yeah.
He's talking about the stream. I think what you're talking about, the ravine, is what's on my property.
Oh, okay.
It does go into a ravine on her property. It's even more pronounced, right? It's a big, it opens right up. Yep. So on these plans, we have, grading plans and, utilities and everything all through these several sheets, and, all that detail is shown. And then, we had some pictures. I can't remember if we showed these to you the last time or not. These pictures we showed to, the town. They asked about Maple Street and the homes along Maple Street, so we took some pictures along there. And then there's a picture of, there's a crushed stone area where they use trucks to get in and out when they were doing the timber harvesting. That's the same location as the permanent road that was previously approved onto Maple Street. Now it'll be a gravel, emergency gated access drive. There's a picture of a meadow that, is growing in up the slope, and, that'll be allowed to grow in. And there's more pictures of the homes along Maple Street. And that's it. So, that was, I think I answered the questions that came up, at the meeting. And then I believe, I don't know, Stephen, if you want to just summarize, I know you guys looked for some examples of some of this type of work, and you took a field trip with Stephen.
Yeah, we had a field trip. We went to a project called Fairway Oaks, which we developed 20 years ago. It was 102 units. It was 70 townhouses and a 72 townhouses and 30 unit building. And then we looked at the height of that building, and we looked at the garage underneath the building, the height over there. And, then we went over to, the next project, right next door was the reserve at Snows Brook, 34 single family detached. And, we showed you, some, ponds over there. And crossings and retaining walls. And the final one was, Palmer Woods over right around the corner from them in Plastow, where that's more reminiscent of what these crossings are gonna be like. That's where it had an intermitting stream, and we had the 4 foot open bottom box culvert. But the difference between that one and what we're talking about here, we're gonna probably have more than a foot exposed. Remember how we had to fill in that one? We showed you that? And cause the design was to fill that and leave a foot. And so this one here, and it probably will have more than that under it for the crossings. Okay,
4 feet probably, or close
yeah,
to it.
so,
Right,
yeah, the one we did over there at the reserve, it was a 4 foot culvert on footings, open bottom, but I had to fill it 3 feet,
yeah.
which was a pain in the neck.
So the last item that you looked for was a functions and values report, and then we were talking about that, and then there were some questions about what is a function and value? What are the functions and value? There was something that talked about with, the application and the criteria and, the functions and values of these weeping areas and the intermittent stream. So Luke, put together, there's a standard for that, a standard procedure for function and value reporting and charts and write-ups. So Luke started that work. He actually has a very short report on that. That's a DES standards. And, so take it away, Luke.
All right, I'm gonna go as fast as he did.
I went too fast, tell me, but I mean, I didn't want to.
I'm gonna talk faster than he does. Yeah, so I do have some copies, if you don't mind. Just pass them down and around. Four, if you don't mind. And then.
No,
Well, for Robin.
they agree on this.
So you get one. Okay. If I go too fast, I'm gonna slow down. If you have any questions, ask them. So
Thank you.
I did do the delineation out here. I've been out here several times. And actually, as he had mentioned Fairway Oaks, I had worked on Fairway Oaks.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, because when you brought it up, because that's a class that one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I did the permanent.
What a
stuff.
thread on the line.
It was a long time ago. but
Yeah.
I've been around that long. So when they reached out and said, can you do a functions and values assessment? The forms that are in here is what we'll end up submitting as part of the DES wetland application, because we're in a major project, because we'll be over 10,000 square feet of direct wetland impact. We have to do a functional assessment anyway. So what I did, excuse me, is besides just a brief narrative that's on top, kind of explaining what each thing means. These are the forms, wetland functional assessment worksheet. These are the DES actual forms that I now have filled out that will go in with the wetland application. It's based on the, as it says in section 1, based on the US ACE, that's Army Corps of Engineers highway methodology. So that's kind of the standard that we've always used when we've done functional assessments. DES, for whatever reason, when they redid the rules in 2019, they took that information. However, they took the liberty to put them in a different order and called them different things. Why? We don't know, but we have to use this form. We can't submit the Army Corps form, which has it the way we've always done it. So regardless, so what we do as a wetland scientist, we go on the site, we delineate it. Functions and values, the function is, what function does it have? Does it do, as I say, you go down this list, does it have flood storage potential? Does it have ground recharge potential? Does it have nutrient trapping, production extra? Those are the functions. What function does the wetland actually have? The value is kind of more subjective, but does it have ecological integrity? That's something that DES actually came up with. There's 13 criteria that the Army Corps uses. DES, when they wrote it, they had to add one, which is ecological integrity. And just about every wetland, unless it's a really small one, has ecological integrity. They have a whole big giant definition on that. But so based on the wetlands that are out here, both of them have ecological integrity. I did 2 separate forms. One for the intermittent stream, which as we talked about, has the 2 proposed crossings coming in. So that's one resource. It's an intermittent stream. It's, as far as I know, because I haven't really gone off site, it's a separate drainage aside from the big wetland out back, which is literally one wetland. It's one wetland system, because you've seen the maps and it goes like this. Up and down. It's like a big giant hand, but it's the big wetland down below, but everything seeps into it. It's hillside seeps that come into it. So there's two wetland types that are out there. So they say, I look at each resource and you go down the list. And the way that it, actually, this is almost like this could be a really long discussion. But what happens when you do the Army Corps assessment is, there's a
I
whole,
feel you have to hurry.
oh, no, it's just
Yeah.
this, I'm gonna kind of forget stuff, so I'm gonna stick stuff back in. But when we do the assessment, so again, for this, if we're looking at the. Yeah, we'll look at the first one, but we can walk through it together. So if you're looking at the first form, there's two wetland functional assessments, as it's in. First one's for the intermittent stream. I'll walk you through some of it. I won't bore you with all of it. So. And this is what we do when we put them together. We have to have, split screens or two forms, and we go back and forth in different orders. So if we're looking at the first form for the intermittent stream, ecological integrity, yes, they always have that. Education potential. So what we do, and there's some areas in these boxes that aren't checked off. If you look at page 5 of 5, that's for the stream resource. If you look at it, there's a lot of boxes that are just empty. Because that's me, in my professional opinion, saying that it doesn't have that function or value. And as I say, when you go down the Army Corps assessment, and I probably should have included a copy of that. In each one, so if we're talking about. Come back to it. So if we're talking about education potential, when I'm going down through the Army Corps assessment, it has, I'm just guessing off here, anywhere from 12 to 13 criteria. Okay, where is the wetland located? And we're using education potential because that's the first one here. So you go down the list and you say, okay, education potential. It's always tricky when we're working on something that's a private lot, because one, it's a private lot, so there's not right of access for. A lot of it is there public parking? Is there public access? Is there safe walking or driving distance from a school? Is there safe parking? Is there handicap access? Is there multiple wetland classes? And there's all kinds of stuff that goes into it, but education potential is a very, very hard one. As I say, I can go through them all because most sites are private. So they're not open to the public to come in and walk around and look at the wetlands and, unless you was kind enough to say, yeah, these wetlands are great. If you want to set up a little platform, you go up there and look over the wetlands, and you have a science class, go up there and say, look at the different types of wetlands and that kind of stuff. But again, with private lots, it's usually not an option. So it very rarely, unless it's town land, I've done plenty of town projects throughout the state where it is an education potential aspect, because they say we want to open it up to the public. It's on town land, it's on conservation land, and all the wetlands are protected, and you have paths, and you literally can't take a science class out there and say, look at you have a stream, you have a shrub wetland, you have a forested wetland. It's great education potential. But for this site in particular, there isn't easy access. There's not, there's a safety aspect of parking. Is it easy to get around? Is it open to the public? That kind of stuff. So as I say, for each criteria that's in here, through the Army Corps assessment, there's anywhere from 10 to 14, some have 20 plus criteria that we go down and say, does it have this? And if it does, so for number 5, let's go back, because it has those options in it. Again, I'm gonna go kind of quick. So 5 is groundwater recharge for a stream. It's actually, it says it as groundwater recharge. That's what the state called it. The real term, according to the highway methodology, is groundwater recharge or discharge. And the discharge aspect is important because the recharges can water get into the wetland. Wetlands are sponges, water gets in there, it soaks in for a bit, and then it seeps back down. Discharge is when, especially for the intermittent streams are typically driven by groundwater. Groundwater comes up in the spring, it's got nowhere to go, so it flows downhill. Sometimes it gets overland flow, but in a wooded area like this, it's mostly groundwater comes up, comes to the surface and flows downhill because it's essentially daylighting. So the recharge aspect is one thing. I don't know why the state just decided to call it that, but then put in parentheses both. But the discharge aspect is important too, because for intermittent stream, it is discharging. Like a spring, groundwater's coming up and it's discharging down the hill to her land and just continuing down wherever it's going. So as I say, for number 5, you look back through there, doesn't go in order because some of them are skipped and I don't have them all memorized, but so the major aspects it has, does it have discharge potential? Yes. Do you see discharge? Yes, because water is coming up and flowing down. So in those instances where it has those numbers are put in there. more numbers it has, higher the function and or value. That makes sense? So again, for the stream, we can go down every one. I can just give you kind of an overview. We find another one. Let's take nutrient trapping, number 7. So we go back to the list number 7. I say, is it the suitability of it, yes or no? No, because I don't think it really has nutrient trapping. Other aspect is principal function or value. No, because it's not a principal function or value. One of the other things to keep in mind is when we're doing the functional assessment, it takes into account the existing wetland, where it is in the landscape. Where these wetlands are, there's really no influence because it's all land. So a lot of times for nutrient trapping, it says, is there the potential for nutrients or pollutants upstream of the wetland? Well, not really, because once you get in there, it's just all woods. So, typically the rain falls on the ground, either soaks into the ground, or if it's a really heavy storm in the summer, it flows down, but it's clean water. If this was Central Park surrounded by development, we'd say, yeah, there's loads of potential for nutrients and pollutants to get into the wetlands. But when you look at the wetland system itself, especially here, there isn't a lot of source for nutrients or pollutants because it's all wooded land. So it's not the wetlands' fault that it may or may not have low functions or values. It's just where it lies in the landscape. So if there's no potential source, it's the same thing for sediment trapping. Is there a potential for heavy sediments coming into these wetlands, either the stream or the big wetland in the back? Well, no, because it's just all wooded land. There's no source. Does that make sense?
In our proposed project, even the roads going over the intermittent streams, that water flow is actually collected and routed through treatment. So there's no water coming off the pavement and right into the intermittent stream. That won't happen. It's intercepted and treated to state standards and that finally discharged. So it's not direct into the stream.
Because there'll probably be a lot of salt mixed in there.
Yeah, so that's these two stream crossings, it's pretty much a hydraulic thing, and we want to make sure that works and it's clear, and any type of wildlife, traffic on wildlife travel, we want to make sure. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, and that's okay. And that's in the explanation and everything, that's the first few pages. It goes into each function and or value, the principal functions and values that are there. So when you look at the groundwater recharge discharge, it explains what the function considers and whether or not it has it. And so what I do in my reference forward is, for the most part, is taking the proposal and how it would, if at all, impact any of the wetlands that are out there. And, if you look at it in terms of groundwater recharge discharge, well, we're not going to impact that. We're not putting any more water because we can't, and Carl will tell you, pre versus post for drainage, we can't put more water into a system that's already going there. Usually has to be a little less, I think, if I'm correct, but don't quote me on it because he's the engineer. But if you look at it for the groundwater recharge discharge potential for the stream, and I have it spelled out for the separate ones as you go through it, it's not going to impact it because one, it's not going to add more water to the system. So it's not going to add more groundwater in that the ground can't handle, and all of a sudden you're going to have flooding. For the discharge aspect, it's not going to impact that because any water coming up into that stream, as they say, from groundwater when it comes up and it's flowing downhill, that's still going to happen. But it's nice sometimes when the engineers say, we're putting in a 4x4 box culvert, instead of saying, we're going to put in a 12-inch plastic pipe. Is that good? And I say, no, can you put in a 4x4 culvert? And he says, no, because it's too big and expensive. But here they've actually done it ahead of time because we've worked on so many projects together where we know Fish and Game is going to come back and say, stream, can you put something bigger in there? We'd love it if critters can go through. What I will admit, maybe I shouldn't say it, when I was out there doing the delineation on this, there was a raccoon in that creek. It was the middle of the day and it didn't look great, but there is wildlife. It was just kind of walking around down the bottom, where that cart path goes through, where that cart path is on the lower side, and there's a raccoon there. Wasn't any water in the stream, but so this way, by having those open boxes, the water is not going to be impeded from flowing. There is a wetland upstream on the left as you're going into the site. There's probably adding some water to it, but in terms of the groundwater recharge discharge, it's not going to be impacted because we're not doing anything about any water that's getting there. Water's still going to get there, and when it comes out, we're not blocking it. So that water, that discharge is still going to come out of the ground and go downhill. So it's all rationalized in here. And then as you go through it, as I say, the principal functions and values that each wetland system has is outlined here. If I don't think it has it, I didn't give a rationale as to, it doesn't have it, so we're not gonna impact sort of thing. A lot of them are aspects that it just doesn't have, so if you're humor me, but go to box 3, for the intermittent stream. Box 3, you gotta go back and forth through all the pages, but is fish and aquatic life habitat. The intermittent stream doesn't have it because it doesn't hold water. So it just doesn't have it. You know, and the other, some of the other things are,
So for 14,
yes,
wetland dependent wildlife
wildlife
habitat.
habitat. Yep,
And in parentheses, it looks like a lot of these reference, what is USACE?
that's the US Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay,
They all reference it. That's where they, pardon the interruption, but for, just so you understand, that's where we in the wetland scientist community don't understand why DES changed them. But everything in parentheses is what we've always been using for 20+ years, even longer for people who've been around longer than I. And then when DES rewrote their rules in 2019, they came up with their own form, used the original definitions, changed the names of them and put them in completely different order. So now we have to go back and forth and up and dabble. So yes, it all comes from the US Army Corps of Engineers Highway Methodology. That's the workbook.
and
Is
can
that
you
just New Hampshire? Or did
This just New Hampshire.
And can you kind of just explain how that's done? Like, you know, when you're determining the wetland dependent wildlife habitat.
Yeah.
Using this methodology,
Yes, so
just give me a
absolutely.
shortened
Just,
version of how that.
just as it says, it's wetland dependent wildlife habitat. It's not,
Right.
it's not overall wildlife
Sure.
habitat. There is one aspect that, you know, would sometimes people would get hung up on and say, well, what is wildlife habitat? Well, we're talking just wetland dependent, because that's what, because again, it comes from the Army Corps of Engineers. It has jurisdiction only over the wetlands. They don't have jurisdiction over the uplands. Same thing as the Wetlands Bureau in Concord. They only have jurisdiction over the wetland impact. So that's how this all rationalizes. It's wetland dependent. So that's
That's like turtles and frogs,
absolutely anything that needs water.
not deer.
Critters, nope. So like any insects, you know, any invertebrates that may be using it. Right, fish, shellfish, you know, there are clams and mussels and snails and stuff that we have that are native in New Hampshire. So that's where the number 14, so again. Right, you go to 14, there's nothing in it. In the box,
Right.
because no, it's not suitable because this doesn't hold water permanently. It's intermittent, so. This year, it's probably been dry most of the year. Last year, it was probably flowing every day with all the rain we had. So it's intermittent because that's exactly what happens. It intermittently flows as it intercepts groundwater. And again, for the principal function value, no, because it doesn't hold permanent water, so there are no wetland dependent critters that are using it. A frog will absolutely go up and through there. If there are turtles, they will absolutely go up and through there. They like to go through those low channels that are cool and dry and wet and, you know, kind of focus down into a ravine that they go through. And that's not gonna be impacted because with those culverts there, if there are any critters that are going up and down through that.
Right. So the ultimate permit application for 14 has a lot of numbers in it.
Yes, and so we can go to that one, but yeah, so the wetland dependent wildlife stuff
Right. Yep.
is, it's aquatic critters.
Right.
And when we think of that, just like you had said, it's mostly the small animals.
Yeah.
They go up and through. Larger mammals, anywhere from a skunk up to a bear.
So on the
They'll fit
ravine,
through it if they can, but otherwise they go around.
so we pretty much keep the characteristic of the ravine, but we just cross the ravine.
Yeah.
For
Mhm.
two roads.
Yeah.
So the overall topo is the same, the side slopes, you know, we cross them, we limit the wetland impacts with the head walls and wing walls. In between the two impacts is this water tower that you guys own and operate. And there's wetlands around that. We're not touching any of those. And so that whole area there is sort of, you know, kind of like man-made in a way, but it's all integrated, so we kept it. So it acts as a ravine, a system. Critters can go travel up and down through there at will, and you know, we've kept that ravine functional as well as hydraulically and, you know, with some openness.
Question on this picture here.
That's so that would be the next, what you were talking about, the next type of wetland.
That's yeah,
This
that's.
whole area up here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
and
big wetland.
I'm looking, it looks like it was heavily forested. And not a lot of vegetation in it right now.
Well, it's growing back quickly. I've been working on it for a few years and there's a lot of what we call pioneer succession. You're right. The back part
So we're actually on the back. This picture shows Maple Street and then the
Yeah.
house on Maple Street.
Right,
Yeah.
And then there's another piece of property between
Actually,
most of these homes and our property. And that was also harvested.
right.
And then you see that dark tree line, that's sort of where our property line is. And
Yep.
then,
yeah,
so our
That's what I
slope is
figured.
actually way off to the right of
That's
that.
what I figured, yeah.
Yeah.
So the dark
Here,
line, dark line,
yes, that dark line is a property line. That's just a shrub tree line.
Um,
Yeah. But you're right, it has all been cut.
Right, so I'm just wondering if the development plan is to increase the amount of vegetation in that area.
Yes and no.
We think it's
Only,
gonna fill in naturally.
yeah, well, because there's obviously the development portion itself, which is
Right.
located up the top.
Mhm.
So that's gonna be landscape, drainage driveways and all that. As Carl was saying, the side slopes are gonna fill wetlands, they're gonna impact wetlands, where we can get into the functions and values aspect of it, as you said, there's more numbers.
Right,
So the development is pushed all the way to the top. Whenever we have a wetland impact for anything, we always stick to what I call the upland edge of the wetlands, because we don't go down to the middle and the bottom where it's the wettest, because we know that everybody would say absolutely not. Both local and state and feds would say no. Do something different, so we shift to the top. But we always stay to the highest edge of the wetlands, because we're up, really what I call it, it's like the upland edge of the wetlands, because we're in the highest area of it, where it's typically poorly drained, not very poorly drained, which is down in the center of the wetlands. So there are impacts up there, as you know, and what's gonna be done as part of it is, it's gonna be graded, and that's because, you know, the sites like this.
So it's doing,
And yes, and the development's gonna come
so
with that.
it's growing in.
Yeah.
Now,
That's what I wondered if it
so
was that. big.
that is growing in, and that's image 4, okay? And then we
And that's
have,
down on Maple Street.
yes.
Yes, so
And-
that's looking up between the, pardon my interruption,
Right.
but that's looking up
okay,
from down here
Mhm.
into here. But this up here, it's all, I haven't been there for a year or so, but it's all revegetating on its own.
okay,
Because they came in, logged it, took a lot of the wood, there's probably a lot of good wood in there. And it's just left, so it's all regrowing. Last time I was there was probably, I don't know, half a year or so. But it's the pioneer succession, but the pioneer succession species that are there were, it's like the offspring of the mature trees that were there. It's all a lot of poplar, a lot of oaks, fair amount of ash, a lot of beech, all just growing back up on their own. A lot of these trees, when they cut them in the stumps will shoot.
Yeah.
Like the beech is like crazy right now. They're feet high. All the poplars that have dropped their seeds and everything, those are all growing back. So,
And it's like the fires in the west.
yeah, it is.
There
Yeah.
in 3 or 4 years.
The herbaceous layer here is
okay,
way thicker than it ever was because it gets all that sunlight now. And once you cut a tree in the forest and the sunlight comes in, all that herbaceous stuff, the ferns and grasses start to come in. So
So this is
Yep.
a
it's a good
example of
reference
that.
of it. Yeah.
yeah,
Looking off Maple Street, and we have actually a figure that shows where these photos are. It says, photo 4. So this is, the other guy's property that we're behind that,
Mhm.
but this actually, this is a wetland. And you wouldn't even know it. I wouldn't know it, but he does, and other people that are smarter than I do. But, so the seep comes off the slope, but it does meet the
Yeah.
jurisdictional criteria for a wetland. But this area we will not touch. It's just the meadow off Maple Street, but beyond that, in that meadow area that's regrown, we're gonna be working in there and then revegetating. So in answer, we would be replanting the areas that we're reworking the slopes,
okay.
obviously. We're not gonna rework a slope and just hope something comes. We're actually gonna get it generated,
mhm,
obviously. And we've done a lot of that together over 25, we've been working for 25 years together.
So, yeah.
On the slopes, a lot can
So-
happen in a couple of
The
years.
slopes, we definitely get that going with all different kinds of seed mixes and little, twig plantings and saplings and shrubs and
Yeah.
everything. We have like a mixture of that per square foot or per 100 square feet. And it gets going pretty quickly, and you can see just naturally that it just takes off.
Yeah.
And then we don't
So
touch it.
this.
we saw actually good evidence of that.
Yeah,
And all of this
Yeah, oh,
that we're
yeah.
not touching would be put into a conservation restriction.
Mhm.
And the state would like to see that usually. So that's why we're
So
doing it.
nothing else can ever be developed.
Correct.
so this photo is from April 2nd. Here we are 7 months later. So you're saying if you were to take that same picture, it would look somewhat different,
So April 2nd, things are starting to grow.
just starting.
It's it's deceiving because the leaves and stuff aren't off.
Yeah.
Aren't on rather. But if there was an aerial photo taken in
Well, how long ago?
June,
was
July,
that
August,
Cut
it would
off.
all be green.
Yeah.
Because it's all growing back so quickly, which makes
How
it,
long ago was that cut off, do you know?
I don't know when that was logged.
2 or 3, 4 years ago.
Probably 3 years.
3, yeah.
Yeah, because my understanding is they've had some problems with flooding, I think.
Yes.
And so this will, and once that goes back, that'll improve that.
Yeah, it,
Slow it down, yeah.
absolutely. Once everything starts to grow back, I would get it all the time from clients that say, well, we'll go in there and cut it. It'll make it easier for you. And I say, don't go in there and cut it. I was just doing a workshop the other day and somebody from, NRCS was there and we were discussing a mature tree anywhere from 8 to 10 inches will suck up anywhere from 150 to 200 gallons of water a day. It's just,
Wow.
and that's, in the springtime,
Right.
water tables are up, everything's sprouting. It sucks all that water up, water tables drop in the summer, but in the fall, typically when water tables come back up, it's because all the vegetation is dormant, so they're no longer sucking that water up, and it just goes back into the groundwater. So yes, once this all starts to, and it is growing wonderfully now, it's gonna start using all that water, so it's gonna start pulling that all up again.
But there's ponding up above it, right?
I don't honestly know what's up above it. Most of these fingers that you see that are on here are seepages. There's seepages that come out of the
You got
hillside.
Plans for pond.
Oh, for proposed
Up
ponds,
in-
yes.
Oh, yes.
To intercept, yeah.
Yeah, and the ponds
That'll
won't
handle
stop the water from naturally coming.
No, groundwater seep is gonna still be groundwater seep. So that's what a lot of, if not all of the wetlands that are out here. There's seepages that come out of the hillside, maybe halfway up. And that's why it's like, it's kind of like your hand. It's all wet down here on the bottom and there's all these drainages that come down. It's not open water. It's not open streams. It's not like the stream in the front. There's no real water that comes through. It's just seepages because high water table just comes to the surface, seeps out, and when the water table drops, it dries up. And it's also based on the topo. It's kind of like this. It's kind of wavy as you go through there. I mean, in the back, there are some streams way off in the far corners where, they're putting into conservation land anyway, the proposed conservation easement. That's all forested still. And there are some streams and stuff.
So the-
Water that comes from the top of the hill.
Hydrology will continue. So someone asked about the resource areas across the street from Maple Street, across from our project. So the hydrology would continue. You don't want to dry those up. You want to keep those going.
That's why I
So,
was interested.
It would absolutely continue, but it won't get any worse.
And the properties are all city water, city sewer?
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
One last question about the picture. It looks like a lot of this land is this area, if you go back to the first picture. That's not getting developed. It looks like the development is gonna be up in the white area here.
Yeah, the lighter area, that's where it's all pushed to the top. So it's out of the wetlands. It's in the
And
upper
some of
fringe.
those little ponds are gonna be up, right up in there.
They're gonna be up on the high side. I don't know direction where that is.
Most of this area that we're talking about is just left.
Up in the
It's
west,
gonna be
yeah.
in the conservation easement, actually.
Yeah.
Except for the emergency access gravel gated drive and people would be allowed to walk up and down that and enjoy it, and, that type of thing.
But it will be developing, growing, and,
Yeah, everything down on the bottom side, which is on the east, on the bottom side of the hill, it's growing right now. It's gonna continue to grow short of the access drive coming in, but there's no other work proposed down there. And as Carl was saying, with the side slope, when we go to replant that, the only areas that will be maintained, I think, he'll correct me, are some of the stormwater ponds, because some of those you can't have woody vegetation in, but the rest of it, we're just gonna create a whole planting plan, plant it up and just let it go.
Yeah,
Just let it regrow on its own.
The stormwater ponds, we over-designed them and then we actually have extra capacity under the parking lots if we need them. That way the ponds can work naturally. So we do like to over-design them so that when they do fill in with cattails and all sorts of other plants that you guys talk about, that actually creates good treatment. There's a lot of square footage of vegetated material at the base of these ponds and growing up through. So we designed these so that you can do that. We don't like putting in ponds unless we have to that are, bare, it's like we do like to have them grow in and around the edges of them. So there are maintenance, M&O operation plans that we have to put together that basically the state kind of wants you to let them grow in, but you do have to, and this is all privately maintained, the town doesn't have to touch them. We just make sure that all the openings, all the control orifices and all those, the hardware is, works and it doesn't get plugged up. And if a beaver gets in there, we kind of have to clear it out. so that the pond volumetrics work and everything. But really, we enjoy letting them naturalize, because if we lived here, we'd want to look down and pass through those areas and just have them look like they've always been there. You know, it's all vegetated up and grown in.
And that's what we saw.
We saw that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You saw two types of ponds. You saw the ponds that they were grooming and mowing the lawns,
Mhm.
and then the other ponds with the cat o' nine tails.
Yep.
All growing up in them. So we saw examples of both of those.
Yeah. They looked very natural.
Yeah, they look pretty good. Yeah, yeah.
How do they keep the leaves out?
Oh, you don't.
You have to maintain that.
They have a 4 bay area in the front. Well, when we were together, man, we saw that, stone barrier in
Mhm.
between there. And so any of the drainage that comes into that area, but the leaves that are flying around, they won't go in and clean them out. They'll just decay naturally.
Is it, yes, it would naturally, and you don't notice them. We didn't
It's
notice.
not noticing, but I have a couple of ponds on my yard. But they're fed by pipe. They're not an open box.
Yeah.
And, you know, they plug up. You know, I mean, there'll be so
Well,
many.
that would be in that 4 bay area that we were just discussing. So if you're gonna run drainage into that, then what'll happen is the pipes with flared ends would come into that area, which you would have to clean and maintain.
Yeah.
In this particular scenario, we would be maintaining it. This is gonna be privately owned. It's not gonna be owned by the city or the town.
Mhm.
Okay, so we would have to maintain that. And you're right, the leaves can clog that area, so you have to keep up with that. But what happens beyond that area, there'll be probably a 4 bay area, right, Kyle, with a stone berm where everything won't infiltrate into the next area. Those are the ponds that we looked at,
Right, and we'll show you some pictures later.
Yeah, okay.
you know, and then Luke's report.
Yeah, I was gonna, at that part, I was gonna mention that.
Yeah, well, these, at the last meeting, okay, one of the questions were, how much wetlands is there and and what are we gonna do about protecting the wetlands and all that other stuff? Well, Luke did a nice job by putting it all right here on the front page. So what we have, the total site is 77.1 acres.
Mhm.
We're gonna put approximately 40 acres into a conservation, open space protective area.
Mhm.
But if you look down further, he gets even more into it. He tells you there's 1,214,262 square feet of wetlands, which is 27.9 acres. And we're only gonna be disturbing 58,100. Okay, so the last time we were here, we were talking about 76,000 feet. And since then, Carl was able to design it differently and save another 18,500 feet. So in a nutshell, this is the answer to the questions that you had
Mhm.
about how do we protect it? How much is gonna be protected? How much is it as wetland? How big is the whole site? And how much are you disturbing? And can you cut it down? Those were the questions,
Yeah,
and here they are.
nice.
Luke did a good job.
Yeah, well, I saw that you had underlined that and I
Yeah.
highlighted it.
Yeah,
Cause this is as you look at all the wetlands are on the site, so that 1.2 million.
yeah,
square
this
feet
is a
is
snapshot.
the whole site, that's what's on there for wetlands on the full 77.1 acres. And so the proposed impact is 4.8% of the total wetland out there. So it goes into the functions and values and how we minimize the impacts of the overall functions and values. And as I say, the intermittent stream in the front, it's smaller on site. I mean, it like goes off site and it gets bigger. But for what we're dealing with on site, it's a relatively small area. The wetland in the back is a really large area. But for the most part, this 4.8% really focuses on the wetland in the back because the impacts to the front are small. You know, they're, I don't know, 4,000 or 6,000 square feet. Don't quote me on that. But it's the wetland in the back that, okay, how do we minimize impacts to the overall functions and values that are higher for the larger wetland? Because larger wetlands just typically have more functions and values because they do more. They offer more for, you know, the environment. But so, as you said, they brought those impacts down 18,500 square feet from, I think, the last time they were here. But again, it's only 4.8% of the total wetland area out there on site. And again, we're impacting the higher fringes of the wetlands, not getting down into the higher function and value areas that are soggier. They offer more wildlife potential and everything else down there. So we're up at the higher fringes at under 5% total.
So,
I
He's
can
worked hard.
imagine here. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I'm just gonna-
Jane.
Because it takes a while to see the hand. Yes, our wetlands expert, I appreciate your information very much. Have you all designed development sites with this, close to this number of units at these heights on slopes like this with ponds before? Is this something that you're familiar with and have done something similar to this?
Yeah, a lot of our work is, apartments and townhouses, and we just got one approved, luxury townhouses on the side of a slope that's even steeper than this, in Windham. I think you worked on it actually. And, yeah, for
What'd you
Phelan
say?
Development.
Sorry.
That's sorry, we just,
Oh.
but yes, he was just saying. that I worked on it, so
The
it is-
reserve at
yeah.
Windham. So we've done many of these. Wallace Farm on exit 5 in Londonderry, that was 240 units that had ponds and slopes. We've done a lot of mixed use as well. A lot of golf courses with also integrated, multifamily around the golf courses that have slopes and resource areas. So this is not unusual at all. And we do a lot of AOT work in our office. I mean, most of our projects trigger the AOT permit criteria, which is, impacting over 100,000 square feet on a normal site. So yeah, this is,
Okay.
The nice part is you have water and sewer. That's just one less thing to worry about on that end.
Right. And then again, I really appreciate you having your wetlands expert here. When you look at this scenario, just as it is, and, appreciate all the detail you're going into about pushing it up higher on the hill and all of that's very helpful. As you look at this scenario and Mascoma Lake is, receiving, is part of this whole water system here. Is there any effect that you're imagining or could anticipate on Mascoma Lake, positive or negative on this? We've talked about wildlife, but if you could talk a little bit about that, just any thoughts you might have.
Well, from a hydraulic standpoint and water quality standpoint, the state is going to make us have design point criteria and evaluation at our property line and at Maple Street. So the resource areas is beyond that, and also other people's property that are down gradient, for instance, your swale, all of that. Those design point areas have to be at our property line, and they're going to make us. They're going to go through. We'll have tons and tons of calculations and big reports that go through all the calculations on that. Where for water quality, water volume, peak flows. All the different storm events, they make us now do the extreme storm events as well. So they make us do everything backwards and forwards. And all those design point criteria have to be at our property. They can't, we can't rely on our water going through someone else's property and then evaluate it from there. Those points that you talked about, ma'am, have to be right at our design point areas, which is at our property lines. So those points have to prove that we're not going to have any more or less water behavior or water quality issues for the project. That
Thank
gets
you.
reviewed extensively, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And then you say that it gets treated to make sure that, you're not introducing anything foreign or, that we wouldn't want. How is it treated? What process is used there?
Well, there are a lot of best management practices we can use on that, so the state stormwater volume, 1, 2, and 3, they talk about all those. It's basically a big toolbox of tools that we can use and apply for different types of projects. So on this project, every project's different. And if we have high groundwater with seep, there's different things that we can do and use tools that are most appropriate for the treatment. So they have us quantified, calculation on treatment as well as quality on treatment. So, for instance, if a drop of water lands on the pavement on a parking spot, that has more of a propensity theoretically to take on some kind of loading, right? That carries with that droplet into, something else. So we have to analyze those drops as they come and go across the property. So drainage that falls on a roof usually is a little cleaner considered on, so there's different treatment practices we do for roof than on pavement. This is considered a low load, so it would be residential. It's not an industrial site, it's not retail, it's very low traffic. The people that are living here are pretty, it's not like they're driving trucks around with stuff dripping out of them, all day long. It just doesn't happen. It's really people that, have a place to live and they have jobs in the community, in the area. And they're, pretty clean. They're not driving, stuff that's just falling apart and leaking everywhere. But that really is, so the pavement water, we treat differently. We could do all sorts of things.
When you say,
Usually-
this- yeah,
I
when,
use-
when you say we treat it and we have tools, give me an example of a tool.
We usually call it a treatment train. So, and there's calculations that we have to go through to make sure the water meets a certain threshold before it ends up somewhere else, like in a stream or something. So for a parking lot, the first step of treatment is a good management program. So you're not dumping a lot of sand out there. You're maintaining the quality of vehicle that's out there already. So we talked about that. The residential is a low load. The traffic is very, very low. It's only people that live there. The water gets intercepted, usually in catch basins, usually with sumps that will take care of sedimentation. Some of these catch basins can be fitted with different devices, filtration units. There's even there's all sorts of
Gas traps, right?
yeah, there's traps, there's filter bags, there's baskets, they have pillows, there's storm scepters. Storm scepters is a thing that won't let stuff coming out of that catch basin that has any oil in it or any sedimentation in it. So coming out of that catch basin, the water's already cleaned it to a certain point, sort of like your digestive system. The first part of good eating is actually what you put in your mouth that's clean. And then you start chewing and then it does different things in your stomach. So the same thing with the water on the pavement. And these types of catch basins will pre-treat the water. We have to have pre-treatment. And then when we go to a forebay, we can't have this catch basin emptying out into a pond. You can't do it. Then you have to dump it into a forebay, which is another mini pond that will trap even more stuff before it gets into a bigger pond. So there's like a train, they call it. There's other devices that we can use in between to actually promote recharge. And there's storm tech units under pavement that we can use, that we often use when we need to. They have isolator rows. So all of these things, every tool has, every product has a pretty cool, it's kind of fun to go through on a storm tech system where the water enters. It's already pre-treated, but it can't go into the chambers and into the ground. It has to go through isolator rows first that are wrapped. And that provides an additional treatment of even finer particles. And then it gets into the storm tech chambers, and then that actually is treated through, the materials around the chambers before it gets into the groundwater. So there's other methods for that.
And thank you. I appreciate that very much. I am familiar with sump pumps and some of the things that you were describing. So, with this number of ponds and everything, so this will require maintenance, not every day probably, but at the right times and to be kind of on it, right? So that if something, stops working or gets plugged up or whatever, that you're on it. Who's going to do that?
All privately maintained with contractors that are hired on the spot, on call for everything from winter maintenance to summer and everything in between, all the systems.
So regular water testing must be required, I would think.
Usually during construction, they require us to test the water and inspect through the SWIP process. But if you don't have a high load project, then they know that, you know, just by visual, that you're not gonna be getting a lot of pollutants into the system anyhow. But during construction, you make sure that there's different things that we do through the SWIP plans and the EPA permitting that make sure that during construction, we don't have siltation going into those systems. But I mean, even the ponds, different types of ponds do different types of treatment, infiltration ponds, there's wet ponds, there's extended wetland ponds, there's gravel wetlands. I mean, there's all these things that we can apply here in those ponds when we get to it for the best treatment.
That's great. I would think something that, and surely we can discuss this as a committee, but I would think something that would be very reassuring and important would be your plan for what you just described. Because, you know, the long-term maintenance and keeping that water that does flow through this system clean is really, really important, obviously, and maintaining that. So I think that would be a great reassurance, is to see the detailed plan about what you would be committing to, or the owners would be committing to for this.
And that would be during, so we have to come before you again with the heavy duty stuff, like the real final design with all the things that we're talking about as part of the wetland application. And we usually do that in conjunction and pairing with the AOT application, because that talks about treatment and all things that we were talking about here. So we have to go back to you at that time when we have the detailing and go through, you know, a lot of detail with you, because you're going to be asked to have input to the Wetlands Bureau when we get to that point. That's usually the process. We usually don't, most towns, I can't even think of a municipality that we would even be here for special exception for the wetland. It's sort of a precursor, I guess, and it's nice to have, but I can't think of any other town that we have to actually get a special exception for to start the process. And the special exception criteria is you know, a simple, actually relatively simple. But we will be before you with lots of information, with all the things we're talking about that you'll dig into. This is what the things, you know, ma'am, you're talking about. So with the wetland application and the
Yeah,
AOT.
well, I think if you haven't, if it's not necessarily something you do all the time, I'm glad we're doing it, because it helps us get our minds wrapped around this and have input in, you know, at the front end of the project. And then
Yeah.
we're ready, you know, for further discussions later down the road. But, you know, we all have to understand that there are a lot of sites, and I'm not saying they're any of yours, but, you know, humans are dirty. And we have to protect our water, and that's our job, is to protect the water. So I know you're reassuring us that they're not going to have oil dripping from their cars, but they'll have something dripping from their cars. You know, I mean, humans are dirty. That's why our waters everywhere are polluted. So it's our job to oversee that. So we like being involved at the front end like this. So we appreciate it. And to me, I'll stop now, but I think, you know, your treatment plan, I think, is very important for all of this.
I agree, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jean, very good points. Anyone else have any questions?
Just out of curiosity, why are the buildings up and not out? You know, why? Is it the cost or the terrain?
Well, you know, we'd rather have less impact to the environment. So if you go up, it's less impact. If we put parking under the building, it's less impact. It's one whole parking lot. You don't have to have outside again. So it's less of a footprint of development if you go up, obviously. Also, you know, as I get older, like I'd love to be able to live there where I can just park under there and take the elevator up to my apartment and not have to, you know, walk through everything all the time. It's just a very nice thing to live in.
So there's no problem with exhaust with the garage?
No.
No, that's all
Fully.
Yeah,
vented.
they have, that's all mechanically
Yeah.
vented.
So it really just, in going up at any point, adding a floor, it's just one less thing to put on the property and work, especially on a slope site. As you know, we want to be linear and cut on one side and fill on the other, and not, you know, go crazy like everywhere, top to bottom, left and right. And because that would be, you know,
Like that.
almost impossible.
It would be like that.
Right, so there, you know, they got, you know, yeah, they spread out too wide. We'd rather just be more compact and do cut and fill and keep it clean. So, yeah, and going up, it'll create a good tax base and, good energy and, support of the businesses locally and all that.
Yes.
So, can I first ask on this form here, number 12? Can I get on this one? I think you would probably answer.
Yep.
It says the uniqueness and heritage. What does that pertain to?
That is, we haven't gotten to that yet. That applies to the Natural Heritage Bureau for rare and endangered species. We haven't done the NHB request for it yet because I'm speaking to everyone. It's only good for a year. So if we do it too early, and I mean, we're gonna have to do it as we get to the wetland part. And we're gonna have to, again, I'm speaking to everybody. My back is to you. I apologize.
It's okay. We
But
can
I'm
hear you.
answering your question while I'm addressing everybody. When we get to the wetland application and the alteration of terrain application, we are gonna have to do the fish and game coordination. We're just gonna have to. So when we get to that point to get things ready to submit, and we're starting to put those packets together, we'll do the Natural Heritage Bureau request. And when that comes back with any what we call hits for endangered or threatened species, then whether it's a turtle or a plant, then we start those coordinations.
But that's for species, not actual uniqueness of the land or things on the land. It's
Correct.
for
Yep.
species itself.
That one goes to 6. You said 12. So we talked about 12. That was the uniqueness heritage. 6 is noteworthiness. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. I didn't realize they changed it that way. So 6 is doesn't make any sense. 6 is noteworthiness, which I apologize. That's threatened and endangered species. The uniqueness and heritage is part of the whole process, and I do apologize, I have those wrong. The uniqueness heritage aspect comes into historical. Are there any archaeological sites out there? Are there any old cellar holes? Is there any old historical data that there was a farmstead or something
Yeah.
there? That's part of the historical process where we do that. We reach out to the Department of Natural Conservation Resources in Concord, which has the Department of Historical Resources. We do a request with them also. We send them pictures of the site, full plan set, streetscape pictures, and they look through all their records to say, yes, we either have known areas in the site or based on the location of it. They may say, well, based on where it was geographically and in Enfield, we know there was old farms, that kind of stuff. So that's what it goes back to the whole aspect.
We had this.
Said there is a well
Yeah.
there, and I think I'm not 100% sure if the road goes over it, the higher road, or wondering where on the map that well is and what your plan for that well
I
is.
don't know. I don't know offhand where that is, but.
Those
It's,
can,
I wanna say it's somewhere around here, because I believe that stream that goes right, does feed into it.
Yes.
And then comes
It's down,
down.
it's closer to the water tower, right?
I'm
Is that,
sorry?
it's closer to the water tower?
If you're on Route 4 looking at the water tower, it's up towards the left a little bit more. It's more up that.
Where on this was it? Oh, you can point it on yours. I can see
I
it.
can show you.
I may have seen it. I think I might know what you're talking about, but yeah.
I believe it's more up in this area.
Yeah, I think I've seen it. So, yeah, that's where they ask, is there anything out there? So, if, we're out there doing our field work. We say, well, we're trying to sell a hole, so we take a picture and send it to them, and they say, okay.
so that won't be allowed to be touched, like, can you describe the one we saw, Steve?
Oh, yeah, that was at Fairway Oaks. No,
Yes.
what? That was an archaeological survey that was triggered in Massachusetts. Yeah,
So I have the information. So if you go to grading utility plan B, it's in Bravo. I think it says sheet 5. Down the bottom right. So if you look up at that wetland, up in the upper left corner of that view, there's wetland flags listed, wetland flag 31, 30, 29, 28, 27. And it next down into a spot. So if you follow me, it's up in here on page 5 of 15.
Where are you?
So it says, grading utility plan B and yeah.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, so if you go up in the upper left corner, you'll see it, it's
Utility, okay.
it says dug well. and we did locate it, and it's actually this old, like, dam structure. And we're not doing any work around it, actually. It's all gonna be in the woods. And you can see that it's, wetland flag 29, 28, 27 actually goes around it. So it looked like there was something there, like there was a dug well and there was like this wall around it and maybe,
Oh, yes, yeah.
so you flagged right around it.
It's
So,
up in the pinch point.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
pinch.
and I did, because I do know exactly what you're talking about. There was some sort of old, like, just some sort of old, like, earthen dam, and there was a well right there. I
And
included
that's the
it.
one that has the saw blade covering it?
Yes, yeah.
Yep, so that area we're not
Exactly.
touching, we're not touching it. That's part of that system. I
Yeah.
call it that
Oh, there
stream,
it
or
is.
the gully.
Yes.
So we're only crossing the gully twice.
7 and 15.
And that's protected. We're not touching it.
So no one.
You can see
Oh.
the bottom.
Yeah, that's a good point. We would.
But it will be.
Yeah, so,
Something.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
can't even-
I know, but-
so those areas
Yeah,
that
right, yeah.
pop up of interest, like
Right
that
in-
thing,
right in.
we showed it on our survey plan, we saw it, we put it on the plan, you know, we didn't
Right.
freeze it or anything. And the good part is that we're not, that whole area, we're not really touching, and that's part of that stream package, that corridor that we wanna just leave it alone. And it's just, we got lucky. I mean, if that thing was like right where we would have to cross and it was the only place, then, you know, the state would still allow us to do that. But since it's off the beaten path and it's out of our work area, we just keep it. And, you know, if it's of interest, maybe we put a little path to it, but certainly we don't want, you know, anyone like falling in there and get hurt, but we cap it somehow. Then,
But if anything else is found when you come to that, heritage thing.
Yeah.
It's historical.
Yeah, well,
That'll
that's,
be protected too.
yeah, and it goes back to your question, and that's why when I do the request, there's an online account, and it automatically comes up with any known areas that they may have. And then based on what the proposal is, you know, I've sent them the whole design, drop off the packet to them. Because they're historical and old fashioned, they don't do anything electronically yet, so I give them a whole packet of stuff, the whole plan set, they say it's happening. You know, a bunch of pictures, so it shows them the whole site, so this way they can see it and say, well, we don't have anything, and I have to submit the online record that I have when I log into my account. I do the search for that, I outline the whole area, and it comes back either with known areas or no known areas, but I put that all together in a packet, and then they still look at it. They go through all their top secret records at the state that we don't have access to, and they say, well, you know, there was an old farmstead down the street, we know that they traveled and that kind of stuff. So they look at all of it. And if anything comes up, then we typically have to do what's called a phase 1A, where an archaeologist will go up there and walk the whole site and say, no, I don't think, it's kind of like me doing a wetland delineation. An archaeologist goes out and walks out there and says, no, I think based on the landscape and the geography and where it is in town, a lot of times by riverbanks, there's usually always something, so it almost always gets a hit to come back and do. But yes, that's all part of the process, and it's required for the Army Corps of Engineers. They require that. It's called the Federal 106 process. I won't bore you with it, but it's part of the federal mandate that any wetland impact has to go through that too, so it's all part of it.
Do you have another question, since you?
I had a couple, so on the, someone asked about how many ponds on the map. This first page has an additional map above the additional pond above the water tower, but I didn't see it on the other maps. Is that one? I'm sorry, just kind of above where we were just talking where that.
yeah, so, if you look at the first page, there's a blue area, right, near where that well is.
Yeah, that's the one I
Yeah.
didn't see on the.
So that's basically, and then if you look at the same page we were looking at before, grading utility plan B, Bravo. That area there, I put it in as sometimes we call it like a little, it's sort of like a little soak up the rain area. It's, we don't necessarily have to have it, but if we have a slope upward of it from the townhouses and then down into that resource area, a lot of times we like to have like a little berm going across there, and it creates like a dish, like a little bowl. And that just collects things. It does provide some mitigation of the water. But it really just creates this, you know, sort of a little micro treatment area. Instead of just letting the slope go and then just going into the stream, we wanted to intercept that, sort of at that scale, that's a very smaller scale. It's almost like a residential scale. The thing is only, it's a triangle of like 30 by 30 feet or so. It's very small. But that would be like a good example of a soak up the rain garden that we would put in on the edges of properties where we think it's necessary. Because I was looking at that when we were putting the townhouse unit in there in the driveway, and then your intermittent stream is right there. Someone's gonna say, well, in that triangle area, Mr. Dubay, why aren't you putting in a rain garden? Why can't you put in a rain garden? And we're like, oh, okay, we will. But, so we could do it, and that's why we showed it in the grading plan. Randy, when he colored it up, he colored it as water, but I think that's a perfect scale and use for that tool, which is a rain garden. Yeah.
I think the last question, and if we go to the grading plan A, and I'll show you, I don't know really how to read these, so.
Oh, you're doing pretty good so far.
So this part here, this darkened area, I'm assuming is the impact area, correct?
Yes, and the dashed area was the original impact area. We sucked that in. We made it smaller.
Okay.
Same
Is
thing
this
on both
the
sides.
property line of the water tower?
Yes,
And so that goes into the town-owned land?
yes, but there are rights of the basic senior property that the water tower got put on. So the water tower, we're increasing the accessibility to the tower, the maintenance of the tower. The original plan that showed, the road coming up the hill showed that area as well. There are rights of redevelopment around the water tower as long as we stay away from the water tower physically.
So the town doesn't have to do the same thing because it's on their property. They don't have to get the wetland.
I would,
Does the easement cover that?
that's a good question. It's a more of an administrative question. I think that anytime we're working on town property, and we worked this out, we talked to Rob about this as well. We will be working with the water consultant for the town, and town staff, because we're gonna be improving the piping and infrastructure to the water tower, putting in the roads, and actually all the access driveways. So I think that there was probably some kind of a selectman or select person interaction through Rob's office for the improvements for access for there, because the access to the water tower right now is pretty tough. It's, especially in the winter time, and you gotta get up there and everything. Now they're gonna be driving on a paved drive and road coming up and around, and they have places to turn around. And that's all part of that access. But the fact that we actually have a wetland impact on that parcel, and we have, this title and easements and everything, we might have to, there's some kind of a notification probably with the select people and town on that, because it crosses over in that area. Yes.
And you just made me think of another question. Sorry, everyone.
No, keep going.
You talked about the maintenance in the winter time, so that access road off of Maple Street, that is just gravel, I'm assuming has to be maintained in the winter time.
Yes.
And I'm assuming up here with the salt, how does that? How do you minimize the effect of the wetlands there if you are maintaining that in the winter time?
I think it would just be plowed and, there would be some sanding, and it's all private. But it's not something that,
The feet for the fire trucks or whatever, if they had.
if a fire truck really needed to get up there, right? I don't see them dumping a lot of effort into that. It's more of a woods road, especially in this area, you see little fire roads and everything and gates, and, they make their way if they have
So the
to.
fire trucks, even whatever would be going off Route 4, not.
Oh,
for the
right,
most
yeah.
part would be
Yeah,
going off Route 4.
It's an extra just in case, but it's not like we have to have it, perfect, and but definitely, run a plow through it just like you would run any woods road or, access way that you see everywhere around here. So it wouldn't have to be perfect,
Okay.
but
I thought the intent was to have that for the emergency vehicles. but-
it would, I guess we'd work with the jurisdictional authority, which would be, the fire chief.
Because it would have to be passable, basically.
It would have to be passable. I know we had it wide and we had good shoulders on it. It wasn't some you know, half-baked thing with the really heavy, you know, harsh lines. Uh, I mean, we designed it so you could pave it if you had to, and that's why we put it into the package here, but, if we have it hard packed and it's maintained,
Well, it's the same as any dirt road.
yeah, any dirt
Doesn't
road
have
you
to
see.
pave to be passable.
Right, so,
Right.
and the fire trucks get up and down through there, you know. Oh, the other thing is on that road, it's not steep at all, so it's, I think the overall majority of that road is 8%. There's some sections that are 10, but that's just like a typical. I mean, when you walk up and down this road or a truck goes up and down, you're gonna say, wow, this is a nice fire road. This is well done, you know, you see that when you drive on some of the better ones, are like, this is good, this feels good. Other ones are like really bad.
Vehicles would be using that if it's less
Yeah.
steep than off
Yeah.
the-
So the perfectly linear, it's not tight or anything, it's not super steep or anything, and, you know, has good shoulders on it. So the intent would be, have it very, very robust.
And the gravel's more pervious.
Yeah, the gravel's more pervious, right? So, yeah, that's right.
Any other questions? Anybody?
Really.
Shirley,
good question.
Shirley, I'm sorry, I have one more question about the conservation easement of the area around here. When does that come into the plan? Is that something that you're sure you're going to do? And is that built into your plan?
Yes, on these larger projects, you know, we're at the density the zoning, you know, allows. We would not be developing anymore. The conservation easement is something that we typically, when we start working on that with a wetland application, we work with you, when we get back to you, you guys start adding input to that easement language. So, the green area you see on the first page, if we don't need to be building in there, or we build in there temporarily, or we have an access drive, the rest of it can be conservation. And the beauty of a conservation easement dedication is that the Wetland Bureau reviews it, Fish and Game review it, you guys review it, and we write it. There's boilerplates for that, but we actually write it together with you. So we put the boilerplate together, we put in things that they always expect to have. But then we write it together, so you can write your own rules to that, you know, Stephen and you guys would get together with John and write the rules for that, that's best for the land and best for the town. And obviously best for conservation. So, you know, a conservation easement is all these projects that we do. If we have extra area, the state likes to see that, usually the town likes to see it, and they have input on the language of that, of the use. So, you know, sometimes, you know, they'll say, well, you know, if someone wants to put a trail through there, have at it. But no, you know, no one's gonna go in there and start cutting trees. No one's gonna, you know, it's not allowed to be used for certain things. You can't develop it anymore. But they do allow you to maintain things, like if you needed something along Maple Street, the conservation easement says you can do it. If you wanted to do, you know, any infrastructure in there that the town might wanna see, we can do that. But really, Stephen would be saying that green area is sort of off the table forever. And other than maintaining what he already has. So it's just a good thing to have. Sometimes we can get credit for the wetland impact permits and square footages, but I think that in this particular case, the state and you guys are probably gonna wanna see the, what's it called, the in lieu, the fees, and so the easement's not there to take credit for certain things on square footages, but it does effectively help with that. But I think they're gonna be looking for some cash as well that go back into a fund. It's all part of the wetland permit process. And sometimes if you have a piece of property that you want to protect that might be available, we do that instead. But that's for later. But it is on the table, and I think you guys should be excited about it because it adds, you know, you can grow conservation land with that, and it's all part of the permit anyhow.
Just
Okay,
looking at
thank
itself, that green area, it's almost the same amount of space as the whole development.
Right, it's about half.
Which is kind of nice. It's about 50-50.
Yeah,
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Drop
And the other thing I noticed for the first time, I forgot all
I
about
just
this.
noticed that
We had
too.
6 townhouse units. that's a relatively, non-invasive deal.
Right, there's no wetland impact over there. We had a proposed wetland impact at the end of Maple Street with 3 houses. But they were taking up a lot of space, a lot of room, 3 houses on a slope with yards and everything else. So we got rid of those and just put 1 building in and got rid of all the wetland impacts that were back there too, that we had previously put on the plan in the application. So we removed all of that as well.
Yeah, that's funny, because I just noticed
I
that.
know, so on third page.
Any other questions?
Oh, right on Maple Street.
Right on
Oh, you're looking good.
On their meeting.
there. Let's start right here.
Any other questions?
You want us to start over?
Anything, Kate?
I'm coming from an
Ju-
investor
I'm ju-
meeting somewhere else. I'm sorry.
No,
It's okay.
All right.
All
Trying to
right.
get you a brewery to go with all your humans.
Oh,
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That's more important than this.
I'm not gonna lie, I pulled you guys out for a brewery, but I don't drink beer.
Still have one.
Well, Hey, I guess if there be no further questions, we thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay,
for asking us
Well, thank you for your
our
attention.
questions. And,
Shirley, do you want to bring up the pictures that you guys took?
oh, do you want, I didn't know if do you want to see the pictures that we took on our tour?
oh, why not?
Drove all the way here.
And thank you again for taking the time,
Yes.
giving us that tour.
Well, it was a good request and I thought that was important. And I think it worked out pretty good.
It's
I love
just
that.
examples of the things you're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's a 30-unit building that I built, which is at the entrance of our project of Fairway Oaks.
So this is
That's, cement wall.
cement wall.
Yeah, that's a block retaining wall. On those crossings, we use the Mitchie Company with their blocks.
The whole.
And
bunch of
Shea
blocks.
makes similar, blocks.
20-year-old tree planted.
Yeah,
And that
And the last
development
one
was 20 years old.
Actually go back.
and that's a box culvert running under the roadway. I believe that's what that was, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
And the bottom on that one's open.
That had a cement bottom, right?
That-
Sorry, I wasn't able to attend this
Yeah,
one.
that had a concrete bottom. It was
Oh, it had a
10
bottom,
feet
Yeah.
wide. and
but we're
5 feet.
proposing that, you're proposing to do open.
An open bottom, correct. And we do have some, open bottom culverts in that same project down further for wetland crossings. And that's a small clubhouse for that project also.
A question about open bottom versus concrete bottom. When would you use one and when would you use the other?
I think it's more for the wetland crossings.
Yeah, it's,
The wildlife.
The animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting though, because a lot of times we don't, if there's a stream going through, sometimes you put a culvert in because it's like an equalizer. I'll tell you, that if there's a wetland on one side, a wetland on the other side, you can't just block it, because the water wants to fluctuate as it fills up and drains.
Right.
But a lot of times Fish and Game, if we're proposing like a plastic culvert, they'll say, can you put in a concrete one?
Yeah.
You don't put anything in it, because over time, for several different reasons, I don't want to take too long, but, concrete feels more natural supposedly to the critters when they go in. When it's plastic, they don't like it and they won't go through it supposedly.
Oh, interesting.
And also concrete culverts will slowly over time grow moss. And they'll get, leaves and stuff will get in there, sticks will get in there as long as it doesn't block it. But Fish and Game, a lot of times will say, just put in a concrete culvert if it's a smaller crossing. But otherwise, if it's big and open, they do like to have a span out if they can get one, so.
The bottom, open bottom versus the concrete bottom. I know the concrete bottom is good for the animal crossing.
Yeah. And the open bottom just is natural. It's usually in stream crossings. I mean, for this one, I don't know what tier it is. But usually for once you get into tier 3, which is 600 acres or more of a drainage area, you have to put in an open span with a natural bottom. So this way, when critters are going up and down, they're used to it.
Yeah, we don't have, and it is a small drainage area.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty small drainage area.
I believe that was the animal crossing.
Yes, that's a smaller one, and that was an animal crossing. We did a big, retaining wall crossing, and we have 2 of those in that retaining wall area.
More buildings.
That was
Yep,
the
those are the buildings, up along the Haverhill Country Club. We put elevators. The height, we think those are gonna be somewhere around 37 feet.
And how tall were those?
Those are about 35 to 37.
So how the areas look drained.
Who's that?
Hope you went by. that.
Ma'am, can you identify your, I'm sorry, I came in late, but your name?
Wind Desert.
Okay, thank you.
So in that Fairway Oaks project, we had 72 townhouses and a 30-unit apartment building.
That's when you had to fill.
This is the one where we had to fill in. Right? That is an open bottom culvert that was 4 feet deep. On top of the footing, it's 5 feet. And then they wanted us to fill it and only leave a foot exposed. And it was a real pain in the neck filling it because it comes with a top already on it. So we had to get underneath her and fill it from the further side, working our way out. But we did it,
Why did they want that?
you know, something engineers. I don't know why they wanted it that way.
Kids have access for kids,
This is the other
This
side.
is the other side of it.
Yeah, well, maybe,
you know, maybe that's why.
yeah. But that particular crossing was an intermittent stream. And that's kind of what we're dealing with, for the two crossings here.
So this is the swale. Shows the
Well,
swale.
the swale going up the hill, correct? And was that a flared end? I don't know what that was.
Yeah, and the rock berm, wait a minute.
I'm not sure
I
what
think that was
picture
the one
is.
going towards.
That's from, in the cul-de-sac, one of the,
Oh, okay, all right,
there's the berm.
Yeah,
yep. And then the pond was behind that,
Yeah, yep.
and there's the flared end there. That's down by the cul-de-sac too,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Next picture should be the other holding pond. Nope, we're another. Cul-de-sac. Drainage,
yeah, that drainage also goes into, swales on the side.
that's the second holding pond, right?
The 4 bay we've been talking about, you see that rock pile in the center? The water flows from this side into there. And then as it fills up, it goes over to the next section of the pond. And then when it gets to a certain height, it ends up in there and that spills out through that back area. We have a pipe through that berm.
Is it, so it slows it down so it can absorb
Correct.
that better?
It slows it down so it leaves at the same rate as it would have prior to construction. So what we saw was a couple of different types of ponds that day.
in different types of culverts.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
I didn't know that.
All right.
But the first ones at Fairways, that's 20 years old.
Those last ones are the one you're working on now.
The very last one, we're in construction right now.
And the middle one, where
And
it
the
was a
middle one's-
single family.
Right, those were about 8 to 10. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the revisions of the plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're very helpful. And the
Wetlands
wetlands information.
Dark road. That's the dark road. Yes.
Thank you. See you.
Did you get the wetlands?
I did, yes. Yeah, thank you.
We get into that.
Not the big one, but the.
I think we
first one.
like
This is
for-
the,
We know.
Thanks so much.
yeah, that one, yeah. No, that one, this. I had to end up with 200, I didn't pass that on to you.
This is just from the, I don't know, this is from the zoning board.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Okay.
Have Rob.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. I think we should let Kurt go before we just go into
I'll be
discussion.
quick. I'll just be quick and tell you what I'm thinking of, and if you're interested in hearing more, I can come back with it.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I'll just give you a brief overview of what I'm proposing, and if it's a no, you're not interested, then that's fine. If you're interested in more information, I can come back for another meeting and further discuss it. There's no timeline, but basically,
And for, excuse me, any of you, if you don't know, this is Kurt Clark.
I'm Kurt Clark, and I'm the one that basically created the Enfield Trail Map, if you're familiar with that. Working with Jim Taylor. We went out and GPSed all the class 6 roads and trails in town and created that map about 10 years ago now, plus or minus, something like that, somewhere in that range. But anyways, what I'm proposing, I would like to do is, the town has a number of class 6 roads in town. And if you're not familiar with what's a class 6 road is, legally, it's a town road, has all the same rules, all the same rights as any other town road in town, except that the town is not permitted to spend money on maintaining them. So they retain the right of way, basically the old roads that either the town at some point in time just stopped maintaining for a period of 5 years or greater, or was classified at town meeting to become, change the status to class 6, subject to gates and bars, is the RSA wording of it. So the town retains the right of way of the easement across the property, the underlying soil, but they're not permitted to spend any money to maintain them. So they can restrict use of the road, like any other road in town, and it's typically done at mud season as a weight limit restriction. But like right now, this time of year, you can 4-wheel drive if you want to down these roads, and nobody can say, no, you can't do that because you're ruining the roadbed. And that is basically what's happening on a fair amount of the class 6 roads in town, is that they're being used as for 4-wheelers, ATVs. I've seen Jeeps and pickup trucks go down some of these roads. And the state now has in the RSA's a classification where you can create a class 6 road, and actually any probably trail, but you can reclassify it as a class A or class B trail. And that way, the town can spend town funds, conservation funds, probably most likely to do culvert work, put in bridges, things of that nature. And there's the difference between a class A and a class B is basically one restricts all vehicle access to the road. It's like a blanket, no vehicles, period. The other one,
Now, is that powered vehicles you're talking about?
the way it's worded is, shall not be used, class A shall not be used as a vehicle access for any new building or structure, or for the expansion, enlargement, or increased intensity of any existing building or structure. So it's, if you have something that's currently there, and it gets classified as class A, then you can continue, but you can't expand on it, structure. And and the property owner can use it, and then the class B classification,
Also doesn't know.
yeah, should not be used for as a vehicle access for any new or existing structure. So class A is a little less restrictive. Basically, it's basically restricting non-property abutters from using it for vehicle access if you choose. Basically, you can put it allows you to put gates up on that section of the road that you want to do. And class B just cuts off all vehicle access to that section. So that's the basic difference there. And you can always, if the town, and it goes through town meeting, it's a town meeting vote to change the classification. And you can always revert back to class 6 if your town decides that it wants to at a future date. So it's not a permanent change. And there's a list of towns, I'll discuss it later if you're interested in, going through with this. I don't know if you ever walked, the roads. One that I like to walk is off for, it's called Goss Lane now, it's off Potato Roads. And one side's of, it used to be called Bloody Lane,
Bloodline.
Blood Lane. They reclassified because the other side of the road that's maintained, it's called Blood Lane. And it actually goes pretty far into Grantham. It actually makes it all the way to Route 4, Grafton, excuse me, Grafton. Goes all the way to Route 4. There's also the one that's right by the dam down here. The road actually, Mud Pond Road. And currently, that is still a Class 6 road, but someone, a few years ago, the property owners asked if they could put up an unlocked gates on a section of it because too many people were going down with their four-wheelers chewing it up. And because it's Class 6, subject to gates and bars, you are allowed to put a gate, but you can't lock it. You can't permanently block the roads. Where if it's reclassified as a Class A, that gate could be locked. And that way you would have more restrictive use of it. So right now, on my Pond Road, even with the gate, someone can just stop, open the gate and drive their four-wheeler down there if they wanted to. Even just having the gate there is a visual thing, and I walked that road as long as I lived here, because it was always close to where I lived, and it's a nice place to walk. Prior to those gates, it was just being chewed up and made a big mud hole. Since the gates have gone in, it is slowly, we stopped being eroded. It's not in great shape because there's no maintenance on it, but the
No,
erosion has decreased.
It's been fixed.
Um,
Mud Pond Road's been fixed. You can watch one to the other now.
Yeah, well, you could always,
There's,
but it was, sometimes it was, depending on the
there's
weather.
golf mountains been put on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And it's really nice.
That's the snowmobile club that's doing that.
Yeah.
Paul Courier.
Yeah,
it's a-
Mel also was,
Yes.
Excuse me.
it's really nice. Just walked the other day.
Yeah, and that's something, an option, as a trail, the town can spend that money. Right now, the town cannot spend money
Right.
on Mud Pond Road. Just legally, they're not permitted to,
Because it's the class.
so it's Class 6. Lebanon has, converted a lot of their Class 6 roads to Class A or Class B trails. Because it keeps the public right of way, but it reduces the amount of erosion that happens with, wheeled vehicles.
This means no snowmobiles too, right? Like,
Well, as a class, well, with the trail, you can say snowmobiles are permitted.
so you could say four-wheelers or.
Yeah, because I know that Lebanon, we could ride snowmobiles on some of their Class A.
Yes, yeah, it's, with a trail, either A or B, you can set what is permitted and what's not permitted. Class 6, you cannot say no to anything other than a weight limit.
Hmm.
Just same as posting the roads,
And you can also do improvements too.
and allows you for the town to spend money to improve it.
How many Class 6 roads are there in Enfield?
There might be, it's about. Three, is it?
We do have a Class 6 road guide on our website.
Yeah, well, that doesn't have all of them. That was for some reason, some got missed.
Well, is it, I
In
had
that,
that
online,
discussion before though, because I was told some were missed and then I was told some were turned back to the property owner. So what's the,
well,
I've heard different versions.
yeah, the list online, was created and for political reasons, some were left off.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
this is it right here. This is the,
Yeah, for political reasons,
So
some
they're
are
not
not,
there.
yeah, that's most of them. There's one or two that were not listed, or just for whatever reason. So there's number 14, 14, class 6 roads in town.
What is,
That-
what is your desire? Do you wanna get them all to be, or just certain ones?
Well, certain ones.
15 listed there.
I'm sorry?
And you just said there's 14, I
Yeah.
believe there's 15 listed there.
Okay, I don't know, after,
Yeah, I don't see the county road on there, do you?
Oh, nope, it's not, and it should be.
Should be, that's
oh,
called.
But
Yeah, it goes to no-
I'm sorry,
It doesn't go through to the other side.
actually, these numbers are actually referring to page numbers. My mistake.
Okay,
Yeah, these are page numbers.
okay.
I just looked at the last one, then I'm seeing like 10 up top and.
I only see
Okay.
14.
Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Looks like 16. I'm doing a quick count. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Which ones do you concerned about? Which ones?
Well, I haven't got really, I only looked at that.
Okay,
I mean, I felt that if you folks are interested in pursuing this, or at least pursuing, or going further into this discussion, I can come with a list of the ones that I think would, could be a good start.
yeah,
Because like I said, it has to go to town meeting. So, and probably won't be this town meeting because the timeline is not great.
yeah.
But I mean, like I can come in, I have the maps of where they, I printed off the tax maps of where they're located.
Mhm.
And then, there's also that most of them are shown on the Enfield Trail map here. If you folks have, these are sold at the town office, like $2. And it does need to be updated, because there's some stuff in town that's trails that are no longer, that were done after this map was created, like the Enfield Reservoir area, Smith Pond. But this around is basically, it's all the lines in red are the class 6 roads.
May I ask a question as a member of the public?
Yep.
Yeah, so what would the goal be? Like, is the intended goal to be able to restrict people from using it for certain types of recreation?
Basically, yeah. It is the four-wheeling that is destroying the roadbed.
Oh, they do.
Particularly if they're on a slope,
Yeah,
It's-
because once they go out and churn it all up and then it rains hard,
right.
it
No,
washes out the road. You
Yeah.
basically have a dry brook bed when you're done.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
destroy them. I've seen it before.
Yeah.
And
So,
they can ruin it for snowmobiles.
Say, that's a really hard one. The reason I've been out on Gas Lane, right, is because it's the four-wheeling trail.
Yeah.
But not everybody destroys them and goes spitting them up. Some people are very careful and they fill in the holes and they take care of the down trees. So I think you have to be very careful about how you classify people.
Mhm.
I think you go to town meeting with us. It'll be a very interesting town meeting.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You have a pretty big contingent of people who do outdoor recreation on those trails and they don't, they don't want them ruined either, but they don't want to be restricted.
Hmm.
And Enfield's just had some work we did with Lebanon to, advocate for ourselves over where we touch, Lebanon. Right? Specifically where the patches had their sugar lines across Lebanon.
Right.
And, they were going through similar discussion. And I think one of the things you have to think about is the town history, right? These are historic roads, but it is so hard to get a new road. And yeah, you can go back to town meeting, but it takes a full year. So it's like, you're also land potentially, cutting people off from their parcels. Which I take personal objection to, either taxing
Yeah,
people.
well, I mean, that would be something that I would also be looking at
Yeah.
as to some of the class 6 roads have built residences on them. And those areas, just, I would not even consider reclassifying, I would just leave them as.
I don't
Like
think
they
you have to
are.
have a residence, though. If you have a thing and you wanna go put a tent up for the weekend, it's yours. Right?
Did the planning board's letter that was involved with the whole patch situation, was the planning board advocating to keep it open as like a
Mhm.
recreational access, if I recall?
Unfortunately, Lebanon did give it away.
Did they finally give it away? I know they were in court for a while.
There was kind of a compromise there. A couple of them, they kept as class A trails. But they did give up on a couple of them. So we do have some roads to nowhere
Atherton
now.
is the one that connects like Atherton and all.
McAllister and Atherton, those are the ones in question. I'm not sure which one got sacrificed, but I think one of them's gone.
And I know, Lebanon, the Historical Society was pretty vocal about not doing it.
Oh, yeah. Lebanon actually created a class 6 road study committee and they made recommendations on which ones. I mean, I think there's probably a hybrid. I mean, some of them maybe would appropriately be.
Right, I mean, it's, yeah,
But I also, when I was selectman in Plainfield, I kind of fought hard to maintain, I mean, as a guy who owns a Jeep myself, it is cool to have some class 6 roads to go out
Listen,
and.
my brothers own a four-wheel drive and off-road company. I'm not gonna lie to you. They'll come, people will come for you in this area.
Yes.
I mean, it would be, these roads are being degraded because of,
Some of them are
yeah,
wrong.
you know, and they're just, there's no residence or there's no parcel that's only access will be the class 6 road. So it'll always be a class 5 or better road that would access the person's parcel. And it would be the ones that I would propose, and it would be the roads that just shouldn't have wheeled vehicles on them without some proper maintenance to maintain them. Or like County Road, that just goes up by the discussion that we haven't said, by the water tower, just above the water tower is a
County
road.
Road's different than the Water Tower Road.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, it's separate,
It's
yeah.
right by the Victor Jones driveway.
And
But Hanover gave theirs up, so it kind of goes up and just filters out.
We allowed the property owner to improve, right? Take their access point off of county. Not that they did,
Haven't done anything yet, but yes,
they was given,
that's right.
Mhm.
Tom Jellison. Yep,
and that parcel sold,
I think it has sold.
so. It's essentially someone's driveway at this point.
Well, it sounds like it's something that needs a lot of discussion and thought.
I would say so, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
You're welcome to bring more information.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, if you're interested in pursuing this at some level, then I'll do my more homework and more time and discuss it further. If you're not interested at all, then I'll do something else.
I
What's
think
your
it's,
general feeling?
Yeah, I'd be interested in pursuing
I
that.
wouldn't mind. I think it's interesting that a road has got less town involvement than some trails do.
Yeah.
I would almost think the opposite. I would think trails would be, yeah.
Yeah, it was
And,
it was,
but a road.
I think the law was changed in the late 60s, 70s, because before the law said the town cannot spend money on class 6 road, developers were coming in and saying, that's a town road, I'm gonna build out there, but you have to upgrade the road for me, because it's your road.
Mm.
And the town's like, whoa, no, we don't wanna be doing this.
Yeah.
So they passed this law that says class 6 roads, town right of way, but zero funds being spent.
It's unmaintained. by
Unmaintained,
definition.
yeah, it should be unmaintained, no
Whereas
town funds.
Class A or Class B, they could be required to maintain,
Well, as a trail, it wouldn't be allowed to build,
right.
yeah. But you still keep that legal right of way. Which I think is, when towns give up that legal right of way, you're giving everything away.
Gone forever.
Yeah, it never comes back.
Yeah.
with that, unless you spend lots of money in eminent
I
domain.
know in my hometown, we have great regret over giving up a bunch of those roads.
Yeah.
But it was a way to prevent development back in the day, before zoning.
Yeah.
A town would be like, oh my God, I think Joe is gonna try to develop out there. Let's just give it up. And it's gone.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Blue Jay that goes from Palmer down to, or it was a give up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be interested in making them all, non.
No, to your point, I mean, it doesn't look like there's a lot.
Yeah,
No, and there
Okay,
would be,
your
there
map,
would be
it does-
very specific ones that,
yeah, cause I
I-
think people have the right to four-wheel too, and, yeah.
I think
I
the
was-
other thing is, you really need to just think about what's happened in terms of voting, like what people sent for a message at the polls, right? People are very sensitive to money, so when you start talking, they're gonna wanna know how much
Is it-
might you possibly spend?
Well,
What's
they-
our exposure,
well,
right?
they're
And that
very-
is a very important question you wanna have before you go to town meeting, because if you do not have a projected number you think you might come ask them for, it's gonna be hard, and I think it's fair, right? People, they aren't suffering in abject suffering, like Enfield is a very fortunate community. And Kurt's done some great data for us on how much we have per household, we are very fortunate here, but it still hurts when you go to the grocery store, right? And I have a lot of empathy for people, so I think if you wanna go down this road, you really need to be able to quantify it.
Well, I think just as many will be, pushed back on restrictions. But don't like restrictions.
And I mean, in fairness, it's their property, right? This is New Hampshire, we're very property oriented.
Pardon me.
Live free or die.
I mean, it'll be, I mean, these roads are not being used to the ones I would propose would not be used to access anything that's pre-existing. So,
You're saying a home though, those people like so my family owned on Fowler, up on Fowler, in Fowlertown, right? So
Mhm.
we owned in the middle of the state and we had a right to go up there for a
Mhm.
long time and you could drive your wheel vehicle, but there was no home, right?
Mhm.
It was you go take your ton or you go wander in the woods. And so I think that there's a certain amount of joy, right? Part of living in New Hampshire is enjoying those little things. So is it fair to say, and I guess one of my big things is it's super ableist, right? To be like, this is gonna be a walking trail, or this is gonna be four-wheeler only. Because when you're not able-bodied, being in a regular vehicle is significantly better. So there are people in my life who we take in, we load them, you pick them up pretty much and you put them in a Jeep. So I think there's a certain amount of joy to being able to do, if you've ever been out to, I know Rob's been up there onto Aaron's Ledge, right? And, you know, you don't just go walking up there with somebody who's wheelchair bound. You know, and I think I just want people to think like, it's not just, I'm not saying you can't save the environment and do some of these things, but there's a lot of things to think about.
Now, are you coming from because you're seeing trails?
yeah, I walk these all the time as soon as I found out they existed, I started walking them. And I've been in town a little over 30 years, something like that now. And initially, they were all of them were very passable. There was no issues with any time of the year. The last 15 years, 10, 15 years, certain ones have just become like, this is just difficult to walk now. And that's, I'll take pictures of these areas. And the other classic one would be Lovejoy Brook, Joy Brook Road. I mean, that's wetland. I
Would
mean, the
it
road goes right through a wetland.
Yeah.
would it be
So
ben-
it's like,
Why would you want to drive it?
yeah,
would it be beneficial to shut a road down temporarily? You know, so that.
because it rains, it's just the rain. It gets wet.
No, I mean, if you don't allow any vehicle traffic on it and you allow it to, you know, set unused just for walking for a year or so, would that help at all?
It's the long term, unless you spend money to build the road back up, which would be very expensive. It's just, these roads. Well, I'll come in with some pictures, I'll show you what's happening. But there's, on the Goss Lane line, there's an area where there's ledge across the road, And it used to be a very slight angle.
No, it's a big angle.
Yeah, now I'm not sure how
It's
the
better than
four-wheel, I'm not sure how the four-wheelers get over this thing, but now they're going around the ledge because
Very
they can't
careful.
get up the ridge.
You go on a diagonal.
The,
Is that it?
Which means you're going you're making it wider and wider.
the Wild Game Park, Ordance Park, which is partially in my town, it's in like five towns total.
Yeah, yeah.
The class 6 roads circumnavigated the whole park. And they got so bad that the park itself actually built its own road internally
Wow.
because you couldn't pass through. It was like, especially where there was slope.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the stone wall up here and it would literally drop down into just a dry brook
Right,
bed.
yeah, yeah.
And then the stone wall on the other side. It's like, where did the road go? It's just gone. It's like.
So
5
did they
feet
do
gone.
something to bring those back or?
Another one.
Well, you can't because it's class 6. I mean,
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
private landowners could try to go out there and do something to
I mean,
it.
that's why the town
With
spent
permission
so
from
much
the
money
select
on the
board.
gravel roads to keep them in the condition they are.
Mhm.
I don't know if you folks ever tried driving through Canaan during mud season. I did it once, I did it once. And I said, I'm not doing this again.
I mean, part of me looks at it and looking at that map is that there are a lot of hiking trails that we already have in town
Mhm.
and
Well,
next door
Yeah.
towns.
Yeah.
And we have the full rail trail, which does not allow four-wheelers, and snowmobilers have that.
Mhm.
And I don't see a lot of, in looking at that, I don't think we're talking a lot of real estate here that recreational four-wheelers get to enjoy. I mean, I
well,
can't see,
I mean, the other option as a trail, you can build the road up to a four-wheeling, so it can handle the four-wheelers too. You don't have to, I mean, I'm not saying no four-wheelers either. But with as a trail, it gives you that option to allow them
Fix it.
to fix it,
Mm.
bring it up to a four-wheeler standard. Like the snowmobile clubs do, when they go out and, I mean, they just keep the trees out, the blow downs off the
that's definitely
trail.
a different approach than what I thought, where you were coming from
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that.
no,
Right.
I'm not opposed to,
If
I
that,
mean, that's,
yeah,
that's the difference, you know, between an A and a B, and
Right.
to read exactly which one's which, but
Sometimes
it
it's
gives
the
you.
water bar and savor.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a matter of being allowed to spend the money to do that.
But an organization like the Snowmobile, they're working on class 6 roads, right?
They do tree removers. They don't do anything on the road bed. They do bridges. They'll do bridges to get across. And they'll cut the blow downs. But I've never seen them
So maybe
do
you
anything on
better,
the soil.
if you can bring us
Mm.
pictures and more information.
Yeah.
And
I think one of the other conversations we could have is there are local four-wheeling groups who will, like, I know they were out in Hanover and they were cleaning up a trail and they put the big rock back or they did the water bar, right? And so we don't always have to spend money to do these things. I think we need to explore all avenues of getting it so it's in better
Right.
condition. Because we have a trail master, right? Some of things are funds, we can't put funds, but some of those groups are very, very interested and very active. You know, they have a day where they go out and all they do is pick up trash.
Mhm.
So, and when you see them all in a line coming up the road, you know who they are, and they are careful because they know if they ruin it's forever, right?
Well, I mean, that's the thing with the trail master. He can't work on the class 6 roads.
No, I know he can't.
Yeah,
I'm saying,
but-
like, we're paying the trail master, but in this case, there's an organization.
Right, yeah,
There are organizations around here who have some.
well, I think we better move on for tonight.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
will
I'll come back with a bunch of photos and so the trails that on the class 6 roads that I think would be good starts. And see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we better get to where we need to discuss what, the information we've gathered and, and hear from everybody of what they like to think we should propose or recommend. You have an opinion?
I will tell you guys, just so you're aware, the zoning language is that you guys are informed.
Mhm.
The health inspector
Mhm.
and the planning board. So there was 3 notifications that were sent out for the special exception. Same as you guys got.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The health inspector Vinny sent us a note. His only concern, I think you guys were addressing it tonight, was the impacts. Since they logged it, there's a lot more runoff that's come down to Maple Street. People have complained to him in a few cases about additional water impacts. And so he wrote a very simple letter stating as such, which I will give to the ZBA next week at their formal hearing, the actual special exception. Planning board at their, not last night, but 2 weeks ago at their meeting, they voted not to say anything.
Cause they'll be coming before.
That was their rationale. They're gonna see it. They'll get a bite at the apple during site plan. And one of the things that they addressed during site plan is stormwater management. So that'll come to them, and that was their explanation. I mean, they sort of talked about it a little bit, but there was no sort of formal response for them. But again, no response is still a response. So that was their decision. And then you guys now need to sort of, what's your pleasure? That's basically where we sat. You could say nothing too, if you wanted to. You could send a letter. You could say, we're happy with this, we don't like that. So it's totally up to you. The only concern I had looking at Jay's letter, he sort of, you know, and this is wetlands impacts for the wetlands crossings for you guys. So it's a very, very defined. He kind of got out as, is this development appropriate in this area?
That concept, the law
Yeah,
notes,
Yeah.
the letter I sent. you
yeah, I
guys,
think most of it's not germane to the issue. It's
that's what I was worried about.
right. I mean, I think, and some of it is germane to the project as a whole and another group, but not enough.
Yeah, see, Jay wasn't at our first meeting too.
Oh,
I'm
I
not sure
didn't
that,
know.
you know, he realized that it was what we were addressing.
I mean, I guess you guys, I'm sorry I was late. I think for me, I like the idea of reinforcing what we like and that's what's important to us in terms of those 10 impacts. So if you like the open bottom box culverts, which I personally do, I guess I would like to call out things that we liked in their plan. And then in terms of looking at what Vinny looked at, and I addressed this at our first meeting, where some of those fingers from the logging came as a select board member and also somebody who's interested in conservation. For me, I know they only have to handle the water that's coming off. They can't increase the volume of water, right? I would like to express that while we know we can't force them to contain more water, anything they could do to capture more, to be a good neighbor would be appreciated in some sense. I don't know exactly how to word it, but right, in these retention ponds, if they were able to make it so that, you know, maybe mitigate some of the impacts of the logging by capturing some of, and I think those retention ponds will.
I believe the way they've been talking is that per some regulations, and I don't know the specifics, they can't change water coming out. They need to be the same coming out as it is now.
I would say though, with the logging did change it, right? And so I think you've got
the
some latitude.
growth is there's gonna be regrowth.
Right, that's why I was asking the question. I'm looking at the picture. I'm looking at that picture, and I agree with you. If they can do something to help that.
You basically can't take away you can't take away their water. But in terms of like stormwater mitigation, I think looking at it from like using the calculator for soak up the rain, right? Just to catch it, because until that regrows, there's nothing to force it back down. So just having adequate, not necessarily but having an adequate capture area too. I think the plan from the way they presented it last time, I didn't hear it this time, unless they reduced it.
No.
They have,
Yeah, and then I think it's.
They reduce the impact.
Right, that's what Shirley said, but
Yeah.
not reduce the amount of they could retain.
Right.
they have the ponds to catch any in there, but as far as the runoff, it will remain the same.
Shirley, you got a question?
Oh, yes, Jean.
I agree with, at this point, I think it is important for us to say something. And I think we should point out things that we're in favor of as a way to do that. We had a good long discussion. And the things that I would add to that list, which I think collectively we understood, would be how is the water treated? And, you know, their plans around that with this system of ponds. And they did say that the amount of water would be the same, leaving, the land. And then the other is to introduce the idea of what we do to conserve, and I don't want to use formal language on this, but just the land around the development and ways for that to be conserved or whatever, so that it really, I think, helps protect what we agree to and what they do. So I think that's a very important element. So I'd like to put those two things in that. Here's what we liked. And they seemed very much expecting that we would be in favor, and they invited us to work with them on that. So I think we say yes.
I think they pretty much discussed the conservation land, but they, didn't they? I mean.
Yeah,
That's what-
they did. They
Yeah,
did. They
just-
said, yes, they want to do that.
Rather development.
Yeah.
And, they said they'd be working with us on doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think in the,
Conservation easement.
they talked about using native flora and fauna. I don't know if you talked about it again tonight.
Yeah.
But I think just restating when they said they tend to use native flora and fauna, native plants
Yeah, when they replant.
when they replant. And
Yeah.
so, but just, that's another thing that I think was a good thing that we
Yes.
should have made and maybe state, I don't.
Well, he did make the comment that they would get native grasses and everything
Yeah.
and, just little saplings and plant those.
I was impressed with their other projects that we went down and saw, and you could see firsthand how these culverts are working. And that they have experience with them.
Mhm.
And I think that's a good point, because
Thank
You
you
want-
guys for doing that. It was really helpful to have the photos, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, Ed took the pictures
Thank
and had the summary on it. But it was great because we could see three different, one 20 years, one 10 years, one in development.
Yeah.
yeah,
And you could see in the 20 and 10 year that the regrowth has happened. And it's done a great job. I mean, really, there's a presentation last week, or last month and this month. You can tell that they spent a lot of time to minimize the impact on wetland areas.
Yeah.
And the ones that they're doing, I feel from listening to them that they have a very sound plan
yes.
to address that. So I'm very pleased with what the effort that they put in so far as wetland mitigation is concerned. I think they've done a great job, and we've seen visually how they control that, and they're all working. They did mention something, and it's all gonna come with the plan, is they referred to it as conservation deeded restrictions. So it's very important that we have a lot of input into those. For making sure that the private entity maintains, because maintenance is gonna be huge on this. I think that's what you
Yeah.
touched on, Gene, also.
Yeah.
Is that maintenance is gonna be very key on this.
That is
He
one of
said there was-
the concerns.
I would like to add, he said they don't do, one of my hats in my prior life, I was an environmental, responsible for environmental reporting at a company. And we had to do regular testing of stormwater to make sure that they stay clean. And I think I would like to see us incorporate something into that, just like we regularly test lake water, same kind of deal. They said they have to meet certain criteria, making sure this filtration system is working. Well, it's working day one. But what about a year down the road?
Could we, instead of bounding it, we can only ask anyways, right? Because nothing we do is legally binding. We can
Right.
make the recommendation and ask. Could we ask that they develop a plan with like milestones or markers or whatever it is you want to call it, right? And so that they would be doing the testing, but ask them to set forth a plan, to make sure that these wetland crossings, the impact points continue to work correctly and, be our safe. So I think you could ask them to develop the plan in a way that's like nice and inclusive and do that piece. I like plans that are documented in writing, but not forced by me on somebody else. I guess is how.
When you went down there, the three of you, did that subject ever come up of how the management, the owners are maintaining?
Yeah, we asked it, and they said that They do it,
And it look maintained.
Yeah, he mentioned that they were required to,
yeah,
per these conservation deed restrictions.
yeah.
I think that, the organization, the private organization was required to, basically to keep up with the maintenance. They had to. They didn't have a choice. They couldn't say, we're not gonna do it this year.
What if they don't? What are the consequences?
Well, I guess they didn't have a run into that problem, but, that's something we could ask, you know. but-
Maybe Rob will be back. I bet he knows a little bit.
Mhm.
No?
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, he's gone for the night?
Yeah.
Well, that was very.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, we can,
Didn't even
probably
say
part of the
goodnight.
plan, but I would think that you would have to provide evidence to the town that you fulfilled your obligation.
That's because he left my stuff.
I mean, that's what I would think, you know, just, kind of like the new regulations that they're talking about for getting your sewer inspected and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, it's up to the owner to provide evidence that we're doing it, following those requirements.
So they have to
I would-
file a report.
I would think there'd be
every year
something
Saying this has
that-
been done.
that's, I don't know, it's a very good question. I think that's something. we
That's
need to
gotta
follow
be
through
something
on.
that's either built into state law or something. It's not anything we could.
Because I think the hydrology study goes, that's what I've felt, there should be a hydrology study, and they say there is gonna be one.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, we need evidence of this, in writing that these things are going to be done. Yeah.
And there are consequences for.
Jean?
And we did discuss that, and they did say that they would have a, maintenance. So verbally, they're saying this. They, and we said, totally agree, Kate, we want it in writing, what's the plan? Would like to work with you on that. And so they were definitely verbally saying that they would be doing these things. So I agree 100%, needs to be in writing, and we can negotiate the details of that. But I don't think there's anything, with the water testing and things like that, because that's what they're telling us. And so this is how we get them to commit to that. And whomever is going to be responsible for that, it's got to be built in. If it's not in writing, it was a conversation.
That's gonna be between the town and the owner, not
Yeah,
the engineer and.
yeah, it sounds like the engineers are gonna do their part. Because they have to have the information to get everything approved. But like you said, I'm not worried about day 1 or day 25, I'm worried about day 450.
Oh, absolutely.
And is the stuff really being maintained?
I think if I don't know the best way to do this, but when we approach this, do we give them the bulleted list and that hydrology, we like that they said they were doing, we like that they are committed to doing a plan and the maintenance, and just do the bulleted list and go down in each of these.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can write it into longer sentence, but it's
I think the list is fine myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but then we can't stop them in any way,
No.
right? But if we put this in writing, then when it goes, these are the things that they could be watching for on our behalf.
Yeah, I'm thinking we could see if I'm using the right terminology, see the conservation deed restrictions for the sites we visited.
Mhm.
And then we'd see what the conservation deed restrictions are. What are their requirements for the,
If you
Yeah.
have
The other
it, you can
sites.
actually just look in the registry of deeds.
Mhm.
They're reported.
Mm.
If it's a deeded, right?
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it is, it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's deeded, it's in the registry for the county you're in.
Because that's the way it has to be. If it isn't, and ownership of properties changes, and you can't always count on it. If it's just word of mouth, you're looking.
Yeah.
Cause again, going back to the sites we
Disappear along
saw,
the way.
the 2 sites that were 20 years and 10 years old. You didn't see polluted water, you didn't
No.
see trash around. I mean, the one that was a dry pond area, it was just nicely mowed grass. It was just, I mean, it all looked good. I mean, there wasn't anything that stuck out where you're like, oh my God, this isn't being maintained. So, if we can get a hold of that, how do you do that?
Is it New Hampshire deeds dot? Is it just
One
you
of
Google
them-
it and
Well,
there all
one
the
of them is
counties.
in Plastow, one of them
Grafton
is.
County deeds.
Well, it's not, these aren't in Grafton. So if you go, but
Whatever county.
all the New Hampshire deeds are grouped.
One's
You
in
can find it by county.
Yeah, the first
Yeah, the
one,
Massachusetts.
first old one was Massachusetts.
Yeah,
They'll
and then
have,
the middle one, I think, was Lowell,
Was
wasn't
on
it? And then the other one was in
Was
Plastow.
in plastic.
Yeah,
when I'm looking for something that's a deed, right? So if I don't know the
think we
county
got-
it's in, you just like put in
We got the
town name
date,
and the county name, and then you can find their deed.
the
report.
address of the first one, because that's, we needed it to put it over to get there.
To get there.
But if you guys wanted to look at samples, that's where to look at, you know, and I think,
We Google the names of the other ones with the address.
but I think it wouldn't
I'd like to
change
see
our
that.
recommendation, like we still want them to do that work. So it's more of a point of interest for us, but
Mhm.
I always like looking at deeds.
And then you guys know
You're
that
crazy,
the,
lady.
ZBA meets Tuesday.
Yeah, so this letter has to be done.
Yeah.
Do we make a motion to authorize Shirley to write it with the points discussed and just do it that way so that it's we're not coming back together to meet again?
No.
No, I don't
Yes,
think we
yes,
need to, do you?
Huh?
I don't think we need to meet again.
No,
Unless, I
Okay.
mean, I'm very comfortable.
I think we have a good list. I did.
Did you take
Real
down the
right down
list?
small. I did.
Wait a minute.
I do have a list.
Can you just send me the list and make sure I don't, because when I'm listening and writing too, I.
She is one of my favorite humans. She bails me out all the time.
It's great. Thank you, Whitney.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I overall had a pretty good feeling about where they're headed, you know, I feel like they have experts in charge of each area.
I don't think I would have been able to, I'm so glad we went and saw the conserved area and there was so much, and like, this one's gonna be probably end up being half and half, as they said, so you're not gonna feel like you're in a development, there's so much natural trees around you.
That's cool.
Add to, would it be worth adding to the list that one of the things we like is that they willingly reduced their footprint
Oh,
to
yeah.
conserve more space? Is
Yeah.
that something?
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's something I learned from you guys tonight and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
excited.
we should
I
been able to-
I know.
They reduce their.
Guys, I'm having a day.
They've reduced their impact on the wetland
And I
by
think
a
that,
considerable amount.
Yes.
is that, I think,
That is a definite favorable. I don't have any qualms about either, you know, any one of these. My qualms begin with the owner. You
Yeah.
know, because I wanna make sure that whatever, conservation
Mhm.
we propose or they're proposing is actually gonna happen.
When or Kurt, do you have any comments? Any?
Right. Because you folks are only to make recommendations to the
Right.
ZBA. As one of the, I would say like right at the top, that the ZBA make this a condition of approval, these recommendations. And then at least you got the line of, we would like to see the conservation easements on the undeveloped portion of the property, the quality be maintained, monitored. Just, these are all conditions that we would like to see the ZBA place on their approval. Because without that, I mean, it goes to the planning board and it's not in our regs. So it's all becomes arbitrary.
yeah.
Where the ZBA says, you have to do this, else you lose your approval. And then the planning board can use that ZBA approval stating these conditions must be met before planning board can say yes. Type of thing. So it's sort of like that chain of command
Mhm.
and, there.
I guess I do have a comment, and I'm not sure how this really impacts you guys, but my concern is how they're developed or they're doing things on town's property. You know, I know they were talking about the easement with the property right around the water tower. That, I don't know, that just seems, you scratch my back, like quid pro quo almost, you know, like it just seems a little off, like they're skirting around the system, so to speak.
I don't think is any of the impact
It is
area
part of it
The
is
water
on
tower area they mentioned,
property. So, and I don't know how,
I don't see it, the water tower, these are, where are the impacts?
If you go
yeah,
to,
he did confirm part of it was, and he thought with
Blow
the
up there.
easement agreements because of the improvements to the roads, that there would be some, the select board would then.
Oh, it would make it easier for the
four
town. to-
fifteen,
Right,
They could say that.
So
Four-
415,
four
but that's not
15.
related to what we're weighing in on then.
Right.
Select board.
it's,
No, it's a select board issue where this isn't select board.
right, but there
15.
is water,
Oh,
wetland impact
See it?
on the town land.
415, bottom, third bottom,
Four.
right, there's a quarter.
Yeah. That's 15. Oh my gosh, they're out of order. Oh, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you look at the bottom left-hand corner, kind of, I believe the square is the town-owned land.
Yes, it is. Yep.
And then they have one of their box culverts going into there.
Oh, it's flowing into.
Well, it's under the road and the road's impacting that corner too.
Mhm.
So again, I don't, again, it probably goes to the select board, but it's, if you're speaking now on it, like how do those things marry together? Like, do you guys make your suggestion on that section too, before the select board makes their agreement? Yes, you can do this. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, our responsibility only has to do with the wetlands area and the impact.
Right. But is it just on their property or is it, that's where, I don't know where that line falls. Is it where that grade is? And it doesn't have to be decided, it just, that's my thought. It's a very gray area to me.
I think that, would definitely affect the stormwater runoff farther down. If they didn't put that in, even if it is on town property, but.
And it probably would. I mean, there is also I'm gonna get this wrong, a water asset report that talks about the land around the water tower. I think it was from 2019 or something. And so my concern is disturbing that land. How does that, because failure of that land, it is considered one of the critical assets is the land around the water tower. Or at least that's what this report says. So makes me concerned disturbing the land around there, wetlands or not. How does it impact the viability of that land, which would then impact the.
The water tower, if you guys
Yes.
have never
So-
seen it, has a fence around it.
Mhm.
They're not gonna be able to dig near the water tower.
Yeah.
There's no way. It's not safe, right? So it's not like you're gonna go inside the water tower area and go digging under the fence. You're gonna be, and if they have to, there's gonna be a discussion with the select board. It's
And I
not
think
gonna
we
be,
can-
we just go randomly digging.
I think it doesn't show the fence around it.
I'm just telling you, there is a fence that,
Yeah, this is areas well outside of it, but I think the square, I think
the square that belongs. to
the
it.
square belongs to the town.
And
Yeah,
you're,
that's what the gentleman said. the
Yeah.
one there. He said.
This is what it looks
Okay, okay. Great job.
Mr. Water Tower?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to see?
I can see it.
Probably.
I should soon too.
Yeah,
Did you access the old logging road that's gonna become the?
No.
you can't go on,
Can't
to
go
the-
on
you
that.
can't go onto the developer's property, you can only go on the town property.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the water, you can go.
So
Yeah,
you
that
park
is
in
the
front of
water tower
the
that's,
absolutely no parking sign,
No, this,
right across from the roller rink.
we have some issues with one of our.
It's very
Yeah.
hard to find.
That's what.
I went up and down for
And they're gonna be-
at least 10 times looking for it, and
But how, you can't access it without going in on the property.
Well, you can walk up the easement to the town property, but you can't go for a wander on their property with the, intent of turning them in for something, right? That's basically how the state law is, so
yeah.
you walk up the easement the town has to get to the water tower.
should we,
Okay,
should we include a comment about how much better this proposal is than the one that was 7 years ago? On how much less impact it has on the
Yeah,
interrupt,
we've already put that
is that,
in there.
is that?
That,
We-
that develop,
I mean, it's kind of a new animal.
why that's still on the tax map is because the tax maps never got updated. That development lost its legal status. They couldn't build that today.
Yeah,
I
There
wouldn't,
is no permit.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
It was approved,
All right, so,
but it's,
don't
the
need to be.
approval got not revoked, but expired
Mhm.
because they didn't carry a bond, I
Okay,
believe.
Yeah, I think
So
we should talk about.
that is
what
just-
they are doing.
yeah.
That's just an
And
old
their
tax map.
willingness, we didn't ask them to reduce the impact on the wetland, but they did.
They did it anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
It's very important.
did you guys talk at all about footprint versus sprawl, or, I mean, I know the impact covers that, but
I did, I asked them the question why they went up and not out,
Yeah,
and they said it was mostly environmental impact.
but I think it's mostly it's cheaper for them.
No,
Yeah,
That's what it is. I didn't want to say that.
I asked if
That's what
price,
it is.
pricing,
It is
you
footprint.
know, it's a lot cheaper to build.
Way in the beginning, one of the early meetings that I went to, that's what was brought up, and they said that they couldn't afford to do it unless they could go up.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it just
Yeah.
is convenient that the footprint is smaller by going up than by going out.
yeah, I was just curious, you know.
So it's a good thing.
I think the conventional New Englander thinks, you know, oh, like a bunch of small houses, but that's actually a pretty big impact in terms of the environment.
Mhm.
Especially if you run a driveway,
Yeah,
with a culvert.
Yeah, but they're going, it's mainly financial.
Okay, no, I was just curious.
That's why they're going
Yeah.
up. I mean,
Yeah.
in reality,
It's a big
it's true, it does reduce the
That's
input, but
reduced, okay.
that was a good answer from him, but
yeah.
Yeah, I knew, right, so I decided
we
not to
heard
say it.
that the reason they're doing that is that the.
I've been in real estate for over 20 years, so I know what these guys think.
It's a
and
lot
it's definitely
more
money.
cost effective to go up
Yeah.
than it is. out.
Well, they even said that
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah,
Hey, the side effect of being cost effective though is we get a better environmental outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
there's
impact
gonna be a
is
lot
less.
more conserved land around there by them.
and the fact, I would also add to it, something we liked is, I really like the idea that they tried to mimic the look from the Shaker.
Yeah.
Although
I
we
mean-
can't comment on that from our standpoint, you would
Right.
go to one.
Oh,
of the
that's true.
meetings, right? 'Cause
You're right.
It's not
That's-
it's not one of your 10. and-
That's right, that's right.
But I don't disagree, right? Like, it's just that, like, we don't get to weigh in as a committee.
That's
Well, we can
That
vote
has
for
nothing to do
another
with
public
conservation.
meeting.
I
if they-
wondered.
Yeah, and
They
absolutely,
showed
you
the-
can always
I wondered
feel free to go.
what was going through his head when he did that,
I
Bill.
was gonna tease them. I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
because they were trying to warm us up to something, I think. I think probably the height thing.
Good selling.
yeah, and then the appearance.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
the
pretty
appearance,
common when you
but-
go into any kind of land planning, like, I can tell you from a select board perspective, and we'll get to my report eventually, but,
Yeah.
we ask, like, at Shed Street, we ask potential developer to look at, you know, like architecture that reflects our town history and, you know, the surrounding area. And so I think it's pretty common to do that. It also, your hearts and minds of people often find a place to like the place, then mimicking it to a certain degree is Kate's report. Yeah, I'm gonna get to give my own report.
Do you guys want to do a motion for
Yeah, okay.
authorizing Shirley?
Yeah, thank you.
I'll make a motion to authorize Shirley to write the letter of recommendations from the Conservation Commission to the zoning board.
Oh, okay.
One of us can say.
We need to have a voice vote because we have someone.
Jane?
You wanna start?
Did you hear the motion?
You agree with that?
Yes,
Town Claus, aye.
Ed Ruby, yes.
Carol Wyman, yes.
Kate Conley Stewart, yes.
Shirley Green, yes.
So recording.
Thank you.
So I was gonna ask them why they didn't get the stone facing look on their
Right.
building.
We
just like-
probably don't have that.
That's what I asked what they're using for which.
Yeah, I know. I
That's a good
figured
question,
you might have been going
Do you
there.
have a stack of copies or did he make copies for?
I
everyone?
think he gave each one a copy. Did he give you a copy of the,
Press release.
the press release?
Oh, I saw it.
What's,
Okay. Are you ready to do my report? I can send it around.
Yes, I think you're next.
Okay, before I hand on, okay, we'll start with like, all the good things. So I
Yes, today.
I did the most recent select board meeting, but the prior one, there was considerable discussion and there was a public hearing on Shed Street. Previously, the Conservation Commission was asked at any time when we consider dispensing with a piece of town property to weigh in. And the Conservation Commission had, agreed, and there was some good discussion about, back up to the rail trail back then, I think, and things. So the select board had conducted 2 hearings to sell the property already. We didn't need a 3rd hearing, but we all agreed that we wanted to be super transparent, bring the potential development before we signed a letter of intent. So we did a 3rd public hearing. And we've been listening to feedback, and it happens to be a mill building that matches. And so the pictures in the Valley News do not do it great justice. Rob does have the plans somewhere here with better views. When I go to open them on my phone, they crash. It's a large file, like one of these is a large file. So if you guys are interested in seeing what the developer is proposing for Shed Street, but again, up minimal impact on no parking along the street. So trees, there is a berm already naturally along the rail trail. They're hoping to put in a couple of public rail trail parking spaces. So that is just a letter of intent right now. That kind of gives them some form of momentum. They still have to handle their capitalization and their actual planning. If they come back and show us, what they've got, then it would move forward to a purchase and sale and eventually a purchase. So, it's certainly one of the things the select board talked to the developer about, and we rehashed again in the public hearing was the importance of, we actually put right in the letter of intent. We reserved the right to take a look at the finished siding, because when you get a rendering, it's very expensive to get to your first phase, but really drilling down and deciding how you're going to finish your building. So we reserve the right, we ask for a high quality exterior finish, because the difference between a building that looks like a prison, which is common, I've heard, and a building that looks like a classic mill building is going to be how you finish the exterior. The building is 44 2-bedroom units and 4 1-bedroom units, self-contained washer dryer. And so it's in a very preliminary stage. If you guys want to take a look at it and you have questions, I think it's you can see, and if you want to see on YouTube, I watch a lot of YouTube of other meetings in town, so you can always hang out on YouTube in your spare time and watch it. And then if you have questions, Rob can answer some, Ed can answer some, I can answer some. So that was the crux of that meeting.
What do we put in for YouTube?
Huh? Oh, Town of Enfield.
Just Town of Enfield.
We have our own YouTube here. Big
I
hot.
learn something every day.
You can subscribe and you'll get alerts, and
Their thing is at Enfield New Hampshire.
okay, thank you. I'm the queen. I'm like,
What was
it's
it
a
again?
Google.
On YouTube, it's at Enfield, spelled normally with a dash in the middle, and then NH. So if you go to YouTube and search that, it should.
Like our meeting from tonight will be up on YouTube, but if you're ever interested, and you can kind of scroll and see. So the public hearings typically always start the meeting, and so that one starts at the beginning of the meeting. So if you're interested in looking at it, that piece was pretty interesting. I encourage you to do so. Monday's meeting, we started with a community power update, and community power has really been shepherded by the energy committee. So they came and they posed some scenarios for a potential town meeting warrant article to set an Enfield power rate. So right now there's a Granite Basic, and everyone who is defaulted into community power, which is CPCNH, is on Granite Basic, and you can opt up into more and more sustainable and clean energy. So the proposal for the Enfield power rate is not to opt people up a category of clean energy. It's to put something like an adder that would be, say, 0.3 of a cent. And that would, they're saying create maybe a fund to do some energy related projects. So, and they gave a list of items that could be buy the solar array on DPW, do a solar array on the new public safety facility, and potential like heating study envelopes or houses. So there was a lot of different scenarios. So I think that one, even though it's not necessarily directly conservation, I know you guys are energy minded as well. You might be interested in a presentation at the beginning of Monday's meeting. The town clerk came to explain the temporary reduction and eliminate and hours and the elimination of evening hours. And Wendy asked if anybody has concerns, they email her directly. Her email is whuntley@enfield.nh.us. Dan Kiley gave us a quick CIP plan. And I'm sorry, I should say capital improvement plan, right? It's CIP, just in case somebody is not familiar. Explain some updates. They are also, they've done a little bit to realign so it's visually a little bit more accessible. Each year, we look at it, we talk about it, it gets a little better to read. The CIP plan is hard to read and it's physically very small. We surplus a tractor. It's gonna be an online auction, so if anyone wants to bid on our tractor, you can give us more money. Public hearing date was set for November 18th at 6 p.m. to discuss the allocation of ARPA funds. If you remember way back in COVID, the federal government gave out ARPA funds. You have a series of years. We're coming up on the end of our time where we can set the allocation for that. So that will be discussed then. We had a discussion about having the Mascoma Lakeside Park Committee come in to discuss next steps because they have completed their project. And if you've not had a chance, please go down and see it. It has a lot of great conservation features, and as the land and water grant that they got really was put to good use. It's beautiful. And I mentioned having Conservation Commission involved in the discussion to collaborate potentially on future garden projects, because eventually those are going to have to be taken over, and it's something we've talked a lot about.
So a lot of things we overlap in.
Yeah, I keep being like, and conservation should be invited. So,
Yeah.
so I threw us out there. I'm looking at Shirley and I'm like, I'm just gonna say. And the next piece of news I have to share is really challenging. And so I'm gonna send this around. This is what I was asking if you have. This is a press release from the town of Enfield. I will send it on the table. I know Carol's seen it.
I thought.
It is online. It has been issued.
That's the cybersecurity one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I asked to provide everybody, because I wasn't sure I was gonna make it back from my other meeting in time. Each of you with a copy of today's press release, and in an effort to be really transparent and make sure you're all informed. Especially since you're the first public meeting after this press release. You know, if for some reason someone wanted to join, I want to be really fair to everybody. And Rob was here in case there were questions. We really can't answer any questions. Everything's in the press release. And it's all of the information we have available at this time. And if anyone has questions, Ed Morris would have the most up-to-date information. But right now, unfortunately, the press release contains everything we have, and it's very challenging.
You can't say the amount of money that.
I will tell you that the United States Secret Service is involved, and you don't interfere in their investigation. And they have they're gonna have the best facts. And when they're ready to share with us what they found, then we'll know more. And the select board has set dates to meet so that we can continue to get updates and work with the town team. But other than that, you know, the Secret Service, when they take something over, you let them do it. And I'm very thankful that we have them and they respond.
Yeah, I saw them line. Okay. Yeah, no, I figured that's what you were gonna talk about when you.
Yeah, so,
Not good.
no,
Well, have you ever gotten any of those? Do we need to update your bank account?
Oh, yeah, they have it all the time.
And they are really slick. They look authentic.
Okay.
I keep on trying to remind myself, I gotta just freeze my credit. That's the thing you can do.
you know what, they can get past that too, I promise you, they do it to me.
Well, it's one level.
No, it is, it's very, so, and I think just, anybody who feels like uncomfortable or has any questions should talk directly to our town manager, Ed Morris. And I mean, it's certainly it's been a very hard week.
Mhm.
You know,